Audiobook by Fate's Reader. Don't forget to subscribe and like the channel for more epic series. Drop your recommended novel below. We love to know what you want to hear next.
Tales of Herding Gods, Chapter 441, Flaming Desert. Qin Mu was the Grand Chancellor of Heavenly Saint Academy, so before he left, he handed over his duties to another person. Most of the scholars of Heavenly Saint Academy were from Heavenly Devil Cult as well as numerous directorates. Even if Qin Mu wasn't there would be no problem, so he had no worries. He passed dragon-rearing scriptures to xianxia to find people to take care of the flood dragons. They only eat spirit pills, but different breeds want different kinds of spirit pills, Qin Mu instructed. I have written down the types and the amount needed, Tess. Don't forget, if they don't listen to you, find Linga. She can subdue these flood dragons. Xianxia smiled. With dragon-rearing scriptures, how can I be inferior to the little fox? Aren't you going to bring a few flood dragons to protect yourself? Isn't the little fox following you too? Linger went to learn spells from Fox Immortal, so she won't be going with me. I'm just going to West Earth to scout the land, so there won't be any danger. Qin Mu gave a few more instructions and took leave from Granny C and the rest. Just as he was prepared to have the dragon killing start on the journey, he saw a 5 to 6 years old girl sitting beside it. Sister Killer, aren't you going to West Earth with Nike? Qin Mu asked with puzzlement. Xianxia shook her head. Mother told me to follow you. She doesn't really trust Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, that he doesn't have a human touch. He can sacrifice everything just to achieve his goal, and has made it hard for her to trust him. Your mother sure is thoughtful. It's good to follow me as well. Imperial Preceptor and her objective this time are quite great, so it'll be much safer for you to follow me instead. Qin Mu picked Xianxia up and jumped onto the dragon killing's back. Fatty dragon, set off. The dragon killing immediately sprung forward and rose into the air with the fire clouds. Cult Master, I keep feeling that the taste of Scarlet Fire Spirit pills is wrong these days. Did you change them? Qin Mu shook his head. Fatty dragon, stop being paranoid. If I changed the spirit pills, could you not taste the difference? The dragon killing was skeptical, while Xianxia said in astonishment, Fatty dragon is much faster compared to last time. Your tummy isn't as big as before too. Her suspicion increased the suspicion in the dragon killing's heart. Although he peeled open the spirit pills every time he ate them to see if Qin Mu had done something, he hadn't found anything out of the ordinary. Qin Mu smiled. He had improved Scarlet Fire Spirit pills and Fire Element Divine Vitality pills. The taste was almost the same as the Scarlet Fire Spirit pills, just a little bit spicier. The dragon killing could taste something wrong, but he couldn't tell what it was. Updated by novelfull.net, the dragon killing's speed was much faster than it was in the past, and his endurance was much greater as well. After 2-3 days, they reached Great Ruins. Qin Mu found Moonship according to his memory, and Village Chief Stone Statue was not far from it. Qin Mu couldn't help being astonished when he saw 2 families actually having built themselves homes there. The 2 families had to have noticed the stone statue that could withstand the darkness, and had come to live by its side. When they saw Qin Mu riding a monster that looked like a dragon, but was not a dragon, a killing that was not a killing, they couldn't help becoming nervous. 2 young hunters took up military pitchforks and stood guard outside the door while their young wives looked out from behind them. Qin Mu stopped and brought Xianxia off the dragon killing's back. He greeted the 2 people, and the 2 hunters returned it. Are you a mountain bandit or a robber? I'm just a passerby, coming to see my old friend. Don't worry, I mean no harm. Qin Mu came to stand in front of Village Chief Stone Statue and placed a livestock offering. This is the elder of my family, and I'm here to pay my respect to him. If he saw that his broken body could still protect you guys, he would definitely be very happy. He paid his respects and executed Soul Guide. The clouds instantly turned dark and gloomy while the darkness surged. Soul Guide worked for a moment and numerous skeletons appeared outside the village, but Village Chief Stone Statue did not come to life. Not long later, Qin Mu's magic power was nearly exhausted. He was about to disperse Soul Guide when Village Chief Stone Statue suddenly moved and spat out a few gold coins while speaking. Mar, on Ghost Festival, the night of the full moon, I'll be waiting for you at the gates of hell. When he finished talking, he returned back to stone. Qin Mu picked up the golden coins, which were 8 Fengdu coins. The villagers in the surroundings were bewildered. Qin Mu turned around to thank the people and left them some money. May everyone here help me clean the stone statue frequently so it wouldn't get dirty. When he was done, he turned around to leave. The people looked at his back, and a young woman suddenly woke up from her daze. She suddenly cried out, "Look at the appearance of that youth. Doesn't he look like that heavenly god who drove the ship that night? He indeed looks alike. When that huge ship passed by our village that night, I saw that heavenly god on the ship, and it looked exactly like him. Another woman cried out in astonishment. Don't talk nonsense. He's merely a youth, and is even younger than us, so how could he be the heavenly god of that ship? A hunter said. Qin Mu brought Xianxia to the dragon kiln, and they rode to the west, resting only during night time. They passed by the basin of West Heaven Palace and observed its ruins before leaving. After 10 or so, they finally came to the most western part of Great Ruins. There is also a mountain range, its snowy white peaks cutting off Great Ruins in that direction. There's also a God-broken mountain range here. Qin Mu rode the dragon kiln to one peak, and a thick arrow that was like a beam suddenly came from a mysterious pearl crossbow, raising the wind and snow in a split second. The dragon kiln raised his claws and caught that arrow. At that, he couldn't help jumping in shock and crying out, Cult Master, I've become stronger. Qin Mu looked at the surroundings and saw huge mysterious pearl crossbows operating automatically, adjusting their direction. He then immediately shouted, Fatty dragon, run quickly. Twang! The power of the mysterious pearl crossbows burst forth, and heavy snow came incessantly along with the bolts. The dragon kiln immediately leaped as though he was flying, sprinting to the other side of the mountain. Incomparably thick bolts whisked behind them and transformed into pillars of ice, while more of them came shooting over. The dragon kiln gave a loud roar, and the flames behind him overflowed into the sky. With the dense fire clouds, the flames burned the bolts. However, there were still numerous ice bolts that had not melted and rushed straight for them. While clutching a sword technique in his hand, Qin Mu jolted, and 8,000 swords flew into the sky, slicing countless ice bolts apart. The dragon kiln sprinted down the mountain, and bolts behind him were like the rain. Only when he rushed down the mountain did the onslaught stop. Qin Mu let out a sigh of relief before heat waves assaulted him in the face. He looked forward and saw a vast desert which went as far as his eyes could see. The flames in the desert were blazing, burning the sky till tide turned fire red. Qin Mu turned back, seeing the snowy mountains behind himself. After crossing this flaming desert, we will reach West Earth, Xianxia said in a loud and clear voice. West Earth is right behind it. Qin Mu was puzzled. Why is there such a flaming desert between West Earth and Great Ruins? Where does the fire come from? My mother said that these flames were lit up by gods to block the abandoned people of Great Ruins from running out. Xianxia suddenly jumped into the flames, shocking Qin Mu. She ran around them with a smile. The flames here won't hurt me, for they will only burn the abandoned people of Great Ruins. To us, the flames aren't hot at all. However, to the abandoned people of Great Ruins, the fire is extremely dangerous. I've heard my mother say that if the abandoned people of Great Ruins were to enter the desert, flame markings would appear on the heart of their brows, showing their identity as an abandoned person. The higher the status of the abandoned person, the more flames would show up. Qin Mu stretched out his hand to touch the flames, and he felt a sharp pain. He immediately pulled his hand back, but his fingertips were still burning. He hurriedly extinguished the fire and frowned. The flaming desert was indeed an incomparably dangerous place to the people of Great Ruins. If they went in, they would definitely be burned to death. Keida, come up. Qin Mu's vital kai flew out and swept up the girl, which was running around, throwing her onto the dragon kiln's back. Imperial Preceptor and Palace Master left a few days earlier than us, so we can't stay around here for long. Fatty dragon, big brother, what happened to your face? Xianxia suddenly asked. Qin Mu looked at her with bewilderment. What's wrong with my face? There are many markings on your face. Xianxia cried out in astonishment. The markings are even wiggling, and more of them are coming out. Are you sick? That's right. Big brother is an abandoned person of Great Ruins, but there are just too many flame markings on your face. In disbelief, Qin Mu located the mirror apothecary had given to him in a hurry. He took a look at and saw that there were indeed numerous green and red markings on his face. They were twisted, but distributed evenly across his face. He ripped open his collar and saw numerous green and red markings on his chest as well. He stretched out his palm and saw that the markings were even on his wrist, slowly spreading to the back and front of his palm. Qin Mu threw open his shirt, and more mirrors flew out from his touty sack. He looked at them and saw numerous markings spreading all over him. His whole body was covered in green and red flames. Xianxia looked at him in a daze, staring at his bare torso as he stood on the back of the dragon kiln. The flames had nearly covered his whole body. Mother said that the higher the status of the abandoned person, the more flames will appear on their body. Normal abandoned people will only receive one flame marking at the heart of their brows. But Big Brother has flame markings all over his body. The little girl was stunned. What is his status? Could this be the effect of the fire? Qin Mu pondered over it and said, I touched the flames just now, and they had entered my body to form these strange markings. Fatty dragon, retreat back to the snowy mountains. The dragon killer didn't understand what he meant, but he still carefully retreated out of the flaming desert. Back under the snowy mountains, Qin Mu looked at the mirrors and saw that the markings were gradually dimming. When he reached the foot of one mountain, the markings vanished completely. While keeping the mirrors at hand, he put on his shirt back. He said indifferently, Fatty dragon, continue on your way. It's fine. These markings should be just to identify abandoned people. The dragon killer immediately rushed into the flaming desert, and the markings on Qin Mu's body started to appear again. They grew frantically, but the youth didn't pay attention to them. The sight of the flaming desert was unique. There were flaming tornadoes everywhere, and they whooshed as they swept by the group. The dragon killer's nature was that of fire, so he loved to control fire the most, and often rushed happily into the tornadoes. However, Qin Mu was nearly burned to death once and ordered for him to stop. The dragon killer saw his face turning black from the burns and jumped back in shock. Only then did he obediently start to hurry to their destination. The fire had no effect on him, but it possessed lethal power against Qin Mu. Big Brother, there's an oasis in front, xianxia said excitedly. There's water there. Astonished, Qin Mu cried out, there is water in such a place. He then saw the oasis in the flaming desert. Numerous olive trees were growing beside a beautiful lake, and there were also a few snow-white goatskin tents beside it. The dragon killer immediately ran over to the side of the lake. Qin Mu jumped down and said, visitors have come from afar. Sorry for disturbing everyone. One of the goatskin tents opened up and a youth walked out with a smile. We're not disturbing. I'm currently cultivating unique spells and need someone as a sacrifice. It's you, brat. The expression of the youth changed drastically, and Qin Mu pulled out his sword without any explanation. 8,000 swords flew up together and drowned out the youth. Tales of Herding Gods Chapter 440, 2 Roaming Dragons in the Desert. That youth's reaction was extremely fast. He moved back the instant Qin Mu executed his swords, falling back into the goatskin tent. It was cut to pieces when countless sword lights shot out into it from all directions. Suddenly, they paused and tunneled into the ground like a long dragon, but the youth had escaped into the ground after falling back into the tent. Ban! About a mile away in the flaming desert, 8,000 flying swords flew out of the underground cave, chasing after the figure of the youth. He leaped into midair and opened up his arms. 2 golden wings spread out on his back and flapped frantically, causing countless yellow golden feather swords to face Qin Mu's sword lights. With the continuous collisions and sparks in midair, flying swords flew in all directions. Qin Mu's hand grabbed forward, and the randomly flying swords suddenly paused in midair. They converged towards the center and clanked as they collided, transforming into a 3-yard metal ball that was whirling non-stop. It was none other than Qin Mu's sword pellet. It was huge and whirled non-stop in midair. The feel of metal was abundant. A fire tornado swept over and swept up the youth, swallowing him whole. Yet the next moment, he appeared above that tornado and stood there while laughing. Cult Master Qin, Human Emperor Qin, you really can't stop haunting me. Do you think I'll be afraid of your body covered whole by a tattoo? Receive one of my bow. That youth was none other than Pangong, and he stood atop the tornado, paying his respects by bowing towards Qin Mu. When he bowed, a sinister sacrificial altar appeared behind him, and a devil god showed up on it, ready to bow and pay his respects as well. Qin Mu's 5 fingers spread open, and he pressed down with them. The ground under the fire tornado instantly warped, the sand and rocks swirling and swallowing everything above them into the ground. Pangong's footing became unstable and his bow became misshapen. When he raised his head, he saw that the sword pellet had separated at some point, and the 8,000 swords were spinning crazily. They were like a huge mouth that was covered with sword tips that came with an open mouth toward him. It was spiral sword form, stabilizing mountains and rivers with a finger. 4 continuous explosions rang out within Pangong's body as his divine treasures opened, and his magic power rose exponentially. When his left hand pointed toward the ground, a fire lotus bloomed underground, stabilizing it. His right hand pointed toward the huge mouth that was going to swallow him, and flaming lotuses instantly appeared in it as well. Those flaming lotuses collided with the spiraling swords and blocked Qin Mu's move. Pan Gongtso revealed a scornful look. Cultmaster Qin, I'm already on 7 stars realm. I'm a realm higher, which might as well be a heaven higher. I can totally overwhelm you. Do you feel my magic power making you despair? Suddenly, the fire lotuses shattered and Pan Gongtso was astonished. His magic power doesn't lose out to mine at all. I'm already on 7 stars realm. How could he have polished his magic power to such a level? As an existence that had reincarnated over 10 times, Pan Gongtso might not dare to say he was number 1 in polishing his magic power on the same realm, but he was certainly one of the best in the world. There were not many people who could surpass the density of his magic power in the same realm. Even when Qin Mu did it, he hadn't surpassed him by much. He had fought with Qin Mu numerous times in the past. The first time, both of their realms were the same. They were both on 6 directions realm, and their magic power had been nearly the same. Qin Mu relied on the transformation of paths, skills, and divine arts to lead him along the way, adapting accordingly. This let him take the decisive opportunity, which was why Pan Gongtso had lost. However, when they had faced off the second time, he had raised his cultivation realm faster than Qin Mu, and his magic power had also surpassed him by much. Qin Mu had then relied on his sickeningly huge sword pellet and 8,000 swords to be a match for him. Yet now, he was already a divine arts practitioner of 7 stars realm, while Qin Mu was still on 6 directions realm. By right, Qin Mu should have been overwhelmed by his magic power, unable to even come close to breaking his divine art. Even though it was just their first face-off right then, Qin Mu's flying swords had still destroyed Pan Gongtso's divine art. He might have relied on the sharpness of his flying swords, but it also meant that Qin Mu's magic power wasn't much inferior to his. When Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had attacked Roland's Golden Palace, Pan Gongtso had known that it was finished when Kan Randi surrendered. That was why he hadn't waited for Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor to attack and escaped, leaving behind all the great shamans, shaman kings, and even the Grand Shaman who didn't know he had escaped under the cover of the night. Roland's Golden Palace was wiped out and Grand Shaman was also slain by Imperial Preceptor. Pan Gongtso pondered about the painful experience and knew that he could no longer stay in the prairie. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor would definitely order his subordinate to search everywhere for his trail, so he decided to hide in the flaming desert. He was a reincarnated person, so his cultivation advanced at a crazy speed. He had an advantage that no other divine arts practitioner could rival, and by hiding in the oasis, he could capture the people of West Earth at night and bring them over for cultivation. Like that, in just half a year, he broke through into 7 stars realm. He planned to recover the cultivation of his previous lives and fight his way back to eternal peace to take revenge. When that time came, who would be able to block his bow? Yet meeting Qin Mu made him somewhat flustered. He had raised his cultivation to 7 stars realm and should have overwhelmed him, but the other's abilities seemed to have advanced by leaps and bounds as well. He actually didn't manage to gain any advantage. Pan Gongtso, you have already fallen behind times. Qin Mu suddenly rushed out of the oasis into the flaming desert, and his body moved horizontally as he crossed a mile. It looked like he was controlling the wind. The muscles on his body moved like flood dragons coiling, and his corporeal body was incomparably powerful. You've been hiding here so you might not know. After your Roland's Golden Palace was wiped out, the paths, skills, and divine arts have advanced rapidly. We can already cultivate the primordial spirit on the 6 directions realm, so aside from a divine treasure in 7 stars realm, there's literally no difference. In terms of cultivation realm, you aren't any higher than me. Pan Gongtso's body, which was like a golden Buddha, collided with Qin Mu. Dragon roars and Buddha voices rang out endlessly, and Pan Gongtso's face instantly turned snow white. His arm cracked and broke as he flew backward. This isn't 9 Dragons Monarch technique, he shouted fiercely. 9 Dragon Monarch technique had extremely high attainments of the corporeal body, and was the ultimate art of Emperor Yan Feng. Even though Pan Gongtso had not received it, he had exchanged blows with Qin Mu, who used 9 Dragons Monarch technique. Even though it had been powerful then, there was still quite a number of divine techniques that could rival it, so Pan Gongtso wasn't the slightest bit afraid of it. However, he suffered a huge loss at that 9 Dragons Monarch technique right then. The moves Qin Mu had executed were extremely overbearing. The strength of his corporeal body was incomparably powerful, as though he was a human-shaped true dragon. When its strength burst forth, his muscles, tendons, and bones were like brute dragons exerting their strength all at once. Facing such brute strength, Pan Gongtso's golden Buddha body crumbled, and his arm broke. A bone shard stuck out of his elbow. Sword explosion. Qin Mu pressed his palm downwards. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Countless flying swords fell from midair like rain, and sword lights fell forward like a tidal wave raised by an explosion, drowning out Pan Gongtso. He endured the sharp pain, and his body sank downwards, escaping into the desert before the sword light could touch him. 8,000 swords landed, and the desert nearly boiled. Between the particles of sand, fine sword lights were shuttling to and fro. Qin Mu landed on the ground, and his clothes fluttered. He raised a huge wind to forcefully suppress the flames of the desert. The tip of his foot tapped on the ground. Then he raised again. Everywhere he passed, the flames would automatically split to two sides. Several miles away, the desert was boiling. Countless sword lights rushed into the sky, and Qin Mu let out a roar while his vital Kai went berserk, rushing forward while staying close to the red-coloured sand and rocks. Instantly, there were trails of red sand dragons in the desert. Dozens of them were shuttling to and fro in the red sand, popping in and out. In no time, they came to where the sword light was overflowing into the sky. The power of his divine art suddenly exploded, resulting in a powerful dragon roar which reverberated through the air and sand being blasted into the air. In the sandstorm, flying swords were flashing while Pan Gongtso's figure could be faintly discerned as well. He stood on a huge cauldron, which was trembling. Its sound waves materialized and flecked the flying swords away. The huge cauldron suddenly escaped into the ground and left through the sand. Qin Mu quickly gave chase and shouted, King, go fetch some water and hurry over with Fatty Dragon. Bewildered, xianxia said to the dragon Qilin, Big brother is muddle-headed. He called me King. The dragon Qilin shook his head. You don't know the ability of that Pan Gongtso. If he knows your name, he can kill you by paying his respect to you from 1,000 miles away. So Cult Master didn't call out your real name. It should be because Cult Master doesn't have absolute confidence in killing him. So he asked us to fetch some water and follow after him. Cult Master is an abandoned person, so he can't stay long in the flaming desert. There's also no water vapor in the flaming desert, so he can't use water attribute divine arts as well. Let's quickly fetch some water and hurry after him. xianxia understood his words and was about to fetch the water from the lake when she cried out in astonishment. The dragon Qilin immediately went over and saw that there were white bones all over the lake's bottom. It was hard to count how many corpses had been thrown inside it. Pan Gongtso relied on the spirit and soul of other people to cultivate. For that, he had killed countless experts of West Earth and thrown their corpses in the lake. Do we still fetch water? xianxia's face was pale white. The dragon Qilin bit his tongue and spat a small mouthful of blood into the lake. Its surface instantly churned. Countless soul bugs splashed around the lake, fighting over the blood. The dragon Qilin immediately bit onto xianxia's collar to lift her up and retreated, preventing any water from touching either of them both. This lake has been poisoned and can't be drunk. The dragon Qilin placed the little girl down a bit farther away and said, Climb to the tip of my tail, sit down properly, and lean back. He lowered his tail, and xianxia immediately climbed on. She sat down properly, not forgetting to lean back. The dragon Qilin raised his tail, and xianxia slid down from the tip to his back. The little girl squealed in delight. One more time. We can't play anymore. Grab tight onto the mane around my neck. I'm going to chase after Cult Master, the dragon Qilin instructed. xianxia climbed over to his long mane, and her tiny hands grabbed tightly onto two tufts. Suddenly, a dragon scale rose on the side and covered her. The dragon Qilin did it since he was afraid it would be easy for her to slip off if he ran too fast. Before, there was Qin Mu protecting xianxia, so the dragon Qilin didn't need to worry. But when Qin Mu wasn't around, he had to care for xianxia himself. The dragon Qilin also used magic power to form a barrier around xianxia and gave her a warning to be careful before taking the first step to rush after Qin Mu. His speed gradually grew faster as he didn't dare to suddenly increase his speed. He ran faster and faster, soon surpassing the speed of sound. The flaming dunes passed by them like flickering lights and shadows. Fatty Dragon, your speed is even faster than last time. xianxia cried out, Why didn't you run so fast in front of Big Brother? What does a little girl like you know? If you want a horse to run faster, you need to feed the horse well. The dragon Qilin was pleased with himself and smiled. I purposely run slower so Cult Master will give me better spirit pills in hopes of me getting faster from good food. If I slowly increase my speed, he will know it's the effect of the better spirit pills. In that way, he will work harder to improve the spirit pills. On top of that, he will still take care of how the pills feel in my mouth. If I suddenly raise my speed drastically, he won't improve the spirit pills and will just feed me the substandard product of fire element, divine vitality pills. Don't tell Cult Master that though, or he will become lazy. Xianxia didn't understand what he was saying, but she still nodded repeatedly. The dragon killing ran for a long while, but he still didn't catch up to Qin Mu. On the way, he was aghast when he saw the sight of the exploded dunes. It was evident that Qin Mu and Pan Gongsu had clashed nearby. Not long later, the dragon killing saw a dune in the distance transforming into a red sand giant, which punched the ground ruthlessly. That's the technique of my West Earth's true heaven palace. Xianxia cried out in astonishment. Is that Big Brother? The dragon killing shook his head, a little worried. Cult Master doesn't have magic power that is that dense. Let's take a detour. He took a roundabout way, and couldn't help being stunned when he saw the sand giant. Tales of Herding Gods Chapter 443 Treacherous West Earth. There was a ruin in the desert. More than half of the earth-yellow palaces had collapsed and only some crumbling fences and dilapidated walls were left. Flames were burning a bit more furiously over there than in other places. The space that the ruins occupied was very vast, the size of several thousand fields. Flames blazed around the sand giant, and its body was scarlet from them. The giant had no legs, but it could still travel extremely fast along the great streets and small alleys of the ruin. Below the body of the sand giant was violent sand that kept spinning upwards. Thus, even though it had no legs, its speed was still very fast. At that moment, the sand giant was chasing after Qin Mu and Pan Gongsu. The two of them were being attacked often, and loud thumps rang out continuously. Every strike from the sand dune giant was incomparably heavy, and when they landed on the desert, sandstone would shoot out like swords. Yet the sand giant didn't damage the ruin at all. When it encountered broken fences and dilapidated walls, it would flood over. After it flowed past, the ruin would be left perfectly fine. The divine arts of West Earth was different from those of eternal peace, and the path they took was that of all things having soul. Even sandstone could be changed into a giant to fight, and one strike from a sand giant could split mountains. Its power was unblockable. If Qin Mu and Pan Gongsu got struck, just the terrifying energy alone would be enough to heavily injure the two of them. Even so, they were still trying to kill each other while doing their best to avoid the attacks of the sand giant. Pan Gongsu's broken arm impaired his movements. Qin Mu could control 8,000 swords, but no matter how intricate his sword skill was, it was still hard for him to injure the sand giant. Even if he sliced one of its arms into pieces, this giant would return back to normal in a few moments, retaining no injury. Its body technique was extraordinary, and the attacks of the sand giant were incomparably overbearing. However, since it only used its fists to attack, and not spells or divine arts, it wasn't much of a threat to them. However, what was weird was that the sand giant seemed to only be attacking Qin Mu. It paid no attention to Pan Gongsu. Spell of True Heaven Palace. The dragon killing looked around and asked, "Where is the spellcaster hiding?" "That's a guardian of the desert. It's not a divine art." Xianxia climbed onto his head while pulling on his mane. She took a look at the situation and said, "My mom said that there are many ancient ruins in the desert, and they are places where the gods who guarded the desert lived. When they had to go, they left behind some guardians to look after the desert. Any person from great ruins will be attacked by the guardians." Suddenly, red sand churned in the ruin, and another sand giant stood up, rushing quickly at the youth. Qin Mu stretched his hands out, and numerous scarlet red sand dragons whizzed forward, rushing at the sand giants. While chasing after Pan Gongsu, his vital Kai had been circulating more and more furiously, and the power of his divine art becoming stronger and stronger. At that moment, his battle power was at its strongest. The dozens of scarlet sand dragons tore apart the sand giants. Qin Mu was astonished, for he felt the magic power in his divine art being absorbed. When the sand dragons passed through the bodies of the sand giants, the magic power inside them completely vanished. Pan Gongsu saw a good moment and rushed over with a huge cauldron on his head. The two sand giants behind him, who had absorbed the magic power of the divine art, as well as the dozens of sand dragons, grew drastically and attacked Qin Mu as well. Qin Mu formed fists and straightened his thumb, using a punch to fight against Pan Gongsu's punch. Pan Gongsu immediately felt that his attack had no power, but that there was a concaving power in the fist that was pulling him in. The straightened thumb made Pan Gongsu shudder. The power in that punch of his lies in that thumb. He struggled to break free. having just realized that Qin Mu's move was not a fist skill at all. Instead, it was a sword skill in which his thumb was the sword. If Pan Gongtso didn't break free and the thumb pressed down on him, the sword power would definitely slice him in half. How did this fellow's battle technique improve so fast and become so terrifying? It hasn't even been a year since the last time we fought, so how did his abilities improve so fast? Pan Gongtso used all his strength to break free from Qin Mu's fist. The moment he did so, the sword light in Qin Mu's thumb increased exponentially. This vital kai transformed into a thread, which was like fine swords coiling together. The sword light sliced down when Qin Mu pressed his thumb down. Pan Gongtso suddenly changed into a black shadow which fell and stuck to the sandy ground. He then quickly left into the distance. Qin Mu raised his hand and pressed down, causing a huge handprint to appear on the ground. Pan Gongtso let out a sigh of relief. This guy missed. Yet the next moment, the sword lights that were hiding in the sky and covering the earth hummed and shot down altogether. The area they covered was extremely vast and made it impossible for him to avoid them. Suddenly, a third sand giant stood up from beneath Qin Mu's feet, and the sword rain falling from midair grew disordered. Pan Gongtso broke out from the shadow and transformed into a human to leap out from the desert. He flashed along the way to avoid the sword lights, escaping out of the ruin. He turned back to take a look, only to see Qin Mu being drowned out by the three sand giants. His life and death could not be determined. When this guy gets severely injured, it would be the best time for me to kill him. Just as Pan Gongtso thought that, he saw the dragon Qilin sprinting over and sneered. Even an animal like you dares to make a move on me. He then bowed and shouted sternly, "Fatty dragon." /update by novelfull.net. A huge sacrificial altar appeared behind him, and the devil god on the sacrificial also bowed. The dragon Qilin ignored him, and Pan Gongtso grew slightly flustered. He bowed once more in a hurry. Dragon Qilin. The dragon Qilin was already near him, flames spreading out from his mouth. Pan Gongtso vomited blood. His injuries were not light, and the divine art, which paid respect to the soul, was extremely exhausting to his vitality. Paying his respect twice drained a lot of his vitality. King. Pan Gongtso gritted his teeth and paid his respects once more. xianxia grabbed the mane of the dragon Qilin and climbed onto the head of the fat behemoth to look curiously at the youth before them. Pan Gongtso spat out a mouthful of blood as a beam of fire from the dragon Qilin's mouth emanated with blazing flames, sweeping at him across a dozen miles. Everywhere the beam passed, the dunes were razed to the ground. Pan Gongtso hurriedly hid in the great cauldron and listened as the loud banging sounds went into the distance. The cauldron was then swept into the air and tumbled dozens of miles away. The dragon Qilin sprinted over where the cauldron had landed, but only saw a sand pit with bloodstains. It was obvious that Pan Gongtso had escaped into the ground. My abilities actually couldn't stop him. Those who can live for 10,000 years are indeed all remarkable. His ability to escape is even superior to that of Cult Master. The dragon Qilin exclaimed in admiration. A loud explosion suddenly came from the ruin, and the dragon Qilin turned back to look. Over there, he saw a fourth sand giant rising from the ground. It was 100 yards tall, and comparable to Great Thunderclap Monastery's 10,000 Buddha's pagoda. It moved incomparably fast and chased relentlessly after Qin Mu. I can't let Cult Master be harmed. The dragon Qilin immediately sprinted over, and he saw Qin Mu's body suddenly vanish. The next moment, he appeared in front of him and floated in midair. His whole body was covered in strange flames and teleportation runes circulating rapidly. Qin Mu hurriedly extinguished the flames on his body, his face already black from the burns. Luckily, his clothes were tailored by Yu Zheking and other strong practitioners of Heavenly Feather race, so they weren't destroyed in the flames. Various sounds rang out behind him, and Qin Mu turned back to take a look. The sand giants actually flew out of the ruin and rushed over aggressively. Fatty dragon, fall back. Qin Mu waved his hand and stopped the dragon Qilin who was rushing over. The sand giants were extremely fast and soon rushed in front of Qin Mu. They then swayed and separated into two groups, launching a pincer attack on him from the right and left. Just as they were about to pounce on him, the teleportation runes around Qin Mu's body lighted up, and his body vanished once more. The sand dune giants collided and sand filled the air. Soon though, they took shape once more and hurried back toward the ruin in a frantic rush. Before they could return, however, they suddenly crumbled and transformed back into dunes that piled one onto another. The dragon Qilin hurriedly ran over to where Qin Mu was floating in midair. Below him was a palace that was more than half collapsed. Inside it was a shrine with a wooden god statue that was covered in strange markings. Its head was on the floor. Qin Mu raised his hand, and carefree sword flew into it. He looked at the head of the wooden god statue with a grim face. When he had lured the sand giants out just then, he had returned back to the ruin and surveyed it with Cinnabar Heaven's eyes. He discovered then that there were strange markings flowing continuously on the wooden god statue, so he had sliced off its head in one strike. Once he did that, the markings which were originally glowing slowly dimmed. A terrifying brainwave had rushed out from the god statue toward Qin Mu. However, it was blocked by the jade pendant hanging from his neck. How strange! Qin Mu turned his head back and asked, "Kier, are there gods in your West Earth's West Heaven Palace?" Xianxia shook her head and replied, "I've never heard about that before." Qin Mu gripped the jade pendant and said in a low voice, "There's a consciousness hidden in this god statue, and it even attacked me when I cut off its head. The owner of this god statue should still be alive." Cult Master Pangongtso escaped, the dragon Killen said. Qin Mu didn't mind it. He has been escaping for 10,000 years, and has long perfected the art of it, so it won't be easy to get rid of him in one go. Didn't he also escape when Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor surrounded Roland's golden palace? What makes my heart throb is that there might be a living god in West Earth's True Heaven Palace. He raised his head to look to the west. The wooden statue could actually gather sand to form giants. This showed that it was using the ultimate art of True Heaven Palace. It was called 10,000 Spirit Nature Technique, and was suitable for women to cultivate. Even though Xianxia had imparted it to Qin Mu, his gains weren't great. Imperial Preceptor went to True Heaven Palace, so he's probably going to be out of luck. Qin Mu pulled away his gaze and thought to himself, I hope that god's ability isn't too great, for otherwise he shook his head. What worries me even more is why did this god of True Heaven Palace leave behind this ruined palace? The sand giants are clearly for killing the abandoned people of Great Ruins. How exactly did True Heaven Palace look like originally? He jumped onto the dragon Killen's back, who rushed toward the west. Soon, they covered over 10 miles. The ruin was silent, but after a moment, a rustling could be heard, and the markings on the two pieces of wood gradually lighted up. The head suddenly flew up and landed on the neck of the wooden statue. Its markings grew brighter and brighter. The sculpture actually slowly began to change, its wooden body turning into flesh and blood. What was even more terrifying was that the statue actually twisted its head to the back of its body. Its eyes slowly opened and looked in the direction of Qin Mu. The wooden statue opened its mouth and spoke in a hoarse voice. "A noble of the abandoned people, I swoosh." A sword light broke through the air after having stayed close to the ground, piercing the head of the wooden statue that was changing into flesh and blood. The sword light then flashed, slicing the wooden god statue into countless pieces. Sometime later, and 20 miles away, the sword light returned to Qin Mu's sheath. "God, I've also killed some of your kind before." Qin Mu folded his arms as he stood on the dragon Killen's head. His body rose and lowered along with its movement. Tales of Herding Gods Chapter 444 Bane. As the sun set in the west, the flaming desert was coloured fiery red. Qin Mu rode on the dragon Killen's head, having transformed his vital kai into vermilion bird vital kai to refine each and every one of his flying swords. He was deepening the rune markings on them. He lowered his head and saw that Xianxia had already fallen asleep in the dragon Killen's ear. There was no wind there, and the dragon Killen also used his ear to cover its inside to protect the little girl with utmost care. "Fatty dragon is really not bad," Qin Mu praised in his heart. "This fatty is actually quite meticulous. The taste of scarlet fire spirit pills and fire element divine vitality pills is indeed not that good. I should improve it for him once we find a place to land." "Cult Master, there's an oasis ahead." The dragon Killen suddenly said. Qin Mu looked ahead of them, and he indeed saw an oasis. "I wonder if there's water there. I can endure another day without water, but I'm afraid for care." The flaming desert was incomparably scorching, and there was no moisture in the air. Qin Mu couldn't get any water even when he changed to Black Tortoise Vital Kai. He had never had to worry about the problem of water supply before, but now with Xianxia by his side, he couldn't ignore it anymore. After a moment, the dragon Killen reached the oasis, and they saw a couple snow-white goatskin tents built beside the lake. People wearing West Earth's clothing were raising fire to cook their meals. The dragon Killen looked around cautiously and said, "I wonder if Pangongtso escaped here." "Cult Master, be careful. He's severely injured, so he couldn't have run far." Qin Mu jumped down and opened up the dragon Killen's ear, from which he took out the sleeping Xianxia with a smile. "Don't worry. Since I'm here, even if he's nearby, he won't dare to come out. If he decides to show up, it will just make it more convenient for me to get rid of him." The tribesmen of West Earth wore embroidered headbands. When they saw the newcomers, Their faces changed drastically, but they didn't dare to make a sound. Qin Mu looked around and saw that there were a lot more men than women in the camp, and under the daily hardships, their faces were red from the sun. There were also some two-legged yellow gazelles in the oasis along with some commodities. The group was most likely travelling merchants. Even though the speed of the two-legged gazelles was fast, and their ability to carry weight was also great, riding them was a very bumpy experience. Because of that, only merchants chose to use this kind of strange beast. Even it was bumpy riding the two-legged gazelles. They could deliver more goods. Qin Mu came to an elderly merchant and said, "Elder, my little sister is asleep. Could I borrow a tent?" The elderly merchant immediately nodded and said, "Help yourself." Qin Mu gave his thanks and sent the girl into a tent. The night in the desert was very cold, so it was lucky to get a goatskin tent to keep her warm. On top of that, there were some thick goat fur blankets inside. Qin Mu tucked in xianxia, who was still in a daze. Her tiny hands grabbed onto the blanket, and she smacked her lips twice. She had to be hungry, but she didn't wake up. Qin Mu walked out of the tent to see that the sun had already set. With the crackle of the bonfire beside him, he asked, "Elder, you guys are merchants from West Earth." Everyone looked at Qin Mu's face and didn't dare to speak. Only the elderly merchant in charge dared to open his mouth. "We are from West Earth and are going to Great Ruins to do business. Is Big Brother from Great Ruins?" Qin Mu was speechless at first, then broke into laughter. Even though he had grown quite tall, it wasn't even close to him being worthy to be called Big Brother. The fearfulness of the merchants had to be because of the flame markings on his face. From them, they could deduce that he came from Great Ruins. "I'm indeed from Great Ruins, and I plan to go to West Earth." Qin Mu took out some fresh beef and fruit from his touty sack and gifted it to the other party with a smile. "Elder, thank you for letting my little sister have a place to rest. If Elder doesn't mind, you can just call me Little Qin." The elder couldn't reject and had to accept. "I don't dare to be called elder. The position of us men in West Earth is slightly lower. Only senior women are deserved to be called elders." "Brother Qin, you are a person of Great Ruin, so it is not really good for you to go to West Earth. This flame desert stretches for tens of thousands of miles, and there is blazing fire all along the way. Also, this fire poses numerous dangers to the people of Great Ruins, so it would be best for you to return." Qin Mu shook his head. "I've made a promise to go to West Earth, so how can I break it? Women are the ones who call the shots in West Earth. Eternal Peace Empire also has women generals and officials. Back when Imperial Preceptor was pushing for equality between men and women, he met quite some opposition, so I would have never expected you guys to be even more open than Eternal Peace." The old merchant's face changed and he immediately said, "Shush. You can't say equality between men and women or you will be executed." "How can men and women be equal?" "Women can give birth. Men can't give birth. So of course, the men are a class lower." Qin Mu was stunned. The old merchant glanced around and said softly, "When you reach West Earth, don't say this kind of muddle-headed words." "Of course, that's if you can survive your journey there." Qin Mu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "When you reach West Earth, don't say you are from Great Ruins," the old merchant also added solemnly. "If you say you are from Great Ruins, you will soon be removed." Qin Mu frowned and asked, "Why so?" The old merchant wasn't willing to go into detail, and Qin Mu didn't force him. He continued to use his vital kai to refine his flying swords. When his cultivation got half exhausted, he would consume a few spirit pills. The flying swords became smaller and smaller from his refinement. "I'm still lacking compared to Grandpa Mute, able to refine swords into flowing water." Qin Mu grabbed a flying sword and rubbed it with his hands. It became a small sword pellet, but there were still some protrusions. He executed Carefree Sword, and 8,000 swords collided, transforming into a sword pellet. Even though it was much smaller than before, it was still a square of 2 feet. Only when you refined the sword pellet to the size of a thumb could his refinement technique be considered improved. At that point, he could refine swords into flowing water. Qin Mu dispersed his sword pellet and grabbed Carefree's sword. Nearly 8,000 flying swords came swooshing over one after another, fusing with the mother sword. Carefree's sword became heavier and heavier, and when the last one fused into it, Qin Mu's hand trembled. The sword was way too heavy, but he could at least lift it. He tried to swing it, and even though it moved very slowly, crackling sounds from an explosion and humming from tremors came from the sky. It was like the descent of a huge mountain. The explosion noise came from the heaviness of the sword due to the compressed space. Qin Mu swung Carefree's sword twice, and his arms were already sore. He immediately dispersed the child's swords and no longer tormented himself with it. Those dragon language writings on Emperor's Disc and the True Dragon's Nest are really not bad. The 9 Dragons Monarch technique on them is improving my corporeal body at an extremely fast speed. I'd had no chance to lift this sword in the past. What a pity I still can't figure out many parts of the dragon language on them. In the last couple days, he'd been trying to fuse 9 Dragons Monarch technique with Overlord body through elixir technique, and his corporeal body was improving at a godly speed. In the past, he had only cultivated the body refinement techniques in great educational heavenly devil scriptures, so just the pure power his corporeal body alone was stronger than the divine arts of most divine arts practitioners. If he executed battle techniques like Thunderclap 8 Strikes and Pig Slaughter Knife, their power would be multiplied several times. The power of the corporeal body had an extraordinary impact on battle techniques. The merchants of West Earth went into their tents to sleep while Qin Mu sat beside the lake. The dragon Killin had shrunk his size and asked Qin Mu for dragon rearing scriptures. He lay down beside him and used the flames of the desert to read. Fatty dragon, this fellow has started to put in effort like Linner. Qin Mu was glad. The dragon Killin licked his claws and flit open dragon rearing scriptures to read through it carefully. He thought to himself, Dragon Rearing Sovereign wrote dragon rearing scriptures, so I also want to write my own human rearing scriptures. Not long later, Qin Mu lay down on the dragon Killin and fell asleep. The dragon Killin also put his head down to rest. Even though the desert was filled with flames at night, the temperature was very low. The surface of the lake had frozen up, but the dragon Killin's body was very warm. Flames would puff out from his nostrils from time to time. Near midnight, among the flames outside the oasis, Pangongtso dug out from underground. He looked at the sleeping Qin Mu and hesitated for a moment. He wondered if he should close in to kill that fellow now. Qin Mu breathed calmly, having no idea what was happening around him. Pangongtso hesitated one last time before deciding to land a fatal blow when he saw Dragon Kai flying out from Tautisak as Qin Mu breathed. They were like fine slithering dragons around him. Pangongtso saw Qin Mu's hand in the Tautisak, and his heart trembled. He suddenly changed his mind and turned around to sink back into the ground. He noticed. Qin Mu opened one eye and looked around before shutting it again. He took out the hat he had placed in his Tautisak and continued to guide the dragon in the True Dragon's Nest while he snored. This time he had really fallen asleep. Traces of True Dragon Kai were absorbed by his body, improving his vital Kai and raising his cultivation. Qin Mu had relied on the True Dragon's Nest and Emperor's Disc to cultivate the last few months, because of which his cultivation had been able to raise that fast. Even Pangongtso, who had reincarnated over 10 times, couldn't get ahead of him. Of course, the most crucial point was still his frequent dual cultivation of primordial spirit with xianxia and xianxia. It benefited him a lot, and his cultivation didn't fall behind that of Pangongtso, who had entered 7 Stars realm. When day broke, xianxia woke up and whined that she was starving. Qin Mu used some minced lean meat and vegetables to cook her porridge. He also made some pastries, before refining a few improved spirit pills for the dragon Killin. My human rearing scriptures will definitely succeed. The dragon Killin was full of confidence. Cult Master thought he succeeded in cultivating dragon rearing scriptures, but he has no idea that he's in the grasp of my human rearing scriptures. When the caravan was ready to set off, the old merchant bade farewell to Qin Mu and warned him again. Brother Qin must never say that you are from great ruins, otherwise there will be great trouble. Qin Mu thanked him and got on the dragon Killin's forehead to rush towards the west. Behind him came the bells ringing on the gazelles' necks as they carried the goods toward great ruins in the east. The dragon Killin's speed was fast, but they still couldn't reach West Earth even running all the way to the evening. When they passed by a huge mountain, Qin Mu took a few glances at it, but the dragon Killin ran past it the next moment. Qin Mu then said, "Fatty dragon, go back." The dragon Killin was puzzled, but immediately did as asked. Qin Mu examined the mountain and saw that it was extremely majestic. There were no flames on it, so Qin Mu quickly went to its peak. It was vast and covered in broken fences and dilapidated walls. Qin Mu could imagine the majestic sight back when everything was still standing. There were some dried up corpses buried in the sand, and Qin Mu examined them. They showed up to be giants that had abnormally tall and sturdy bodies. He came to a pillar and touched it. Beside it lay some thick chains. "Cult Master, what's with this mountain?" The dragon Killin flew over on fire clouds. Qin Mu raised his finger to point at the desert far away. "Look over there." The dragon Killin looked in the pointed direction and saw a pitch black ball which let the wind and sand caress it. Its sunship, a dead sun ship. Qin Mu disembarked from the ship, expressionless. "Let's go." The dragon killer looked at his face and didn't dare to say anything more. Instead, he continued to carry him to the west. Soon after, they encountered a second huge ship. It was a shattered moonship. After that, they encountered a third huge ship buried in the desert. That moonship had suffered in an extremely fierce battle and was exceptionally ruined. Qin Mu suddenly came to realization. 10,000 spirit nature technique is the bane of sunship and moonship. Tales of Herding Gods Chapter 445 Night Attack. When the meteorological phenomenon changed drastically at the end of Founding Emperor era, sunship and moonship crafted by the gods of Founding Emperor period were used to drive away the darkness. It allowed things to grow, and the people were able to survive. However, the two types of ships were sharp weapons in battle as well. Sun Guardian of Sunship and Moon Guardian of Moonship could mobilize the energy of the majestic ship so that their own energy would reach the level of heavenly gods. They would gain the mighty force to change heaven and earth. Qin Mu had once used sunship and also borrowed moonship, so he knew the powerful and extraordinary points of the two ships. With secrets of dragon control from dragon-rearing scriptures to borrow the power of the divine flood dragon king and the flood dragons, he could open his divine bridge so his primordial spirit would reach the celestial heavens. However, he could only enter the southern heavenly gates and had no way to enter the depths of celestial heavens. In comparison, borrowing the power of sunship or moonship would allow him to reach Jade Pavilion, which stood beside Jade Lake. Yet sunship and moonship had their bane, and it was 10,000 spirit nature technique. Sunships lent power to sun guardians and moonships lent power to moon guardians. That power came from the bodies of the two ships, not their wielders. The two ships possessed boundless terrifying energy, and with the sun or moon forged by gods as an energy source, they were able to drive away the darkness. 10,000 spirit nature technique had the ideology of all things having spirit and all things having soul. It relied on practitioners' sense of nature to create spirits, awakening all things in heaven and earth, and calling them to fight. A god who cultivated 10,000 spirit nature technique could wake the spirit in sunship and moonship to fight for them. In that case, what awaited sun and moon guardians as well as the sun herders and moon herders would only be a bloody massacre and death. Even the guardians themselves wouldn't be able to escape. Many years ago, there must have been a terrifying battle here. Sunships and moonships encountered a god that cultivated 10,000 spirit nature technique, which resulted in them being destroyed, one by one. Meanwhile, the Qin Mu looked to the west, and his gaze was like candlelight flickering in the wind. West Earth's True Heaven Palace must have some relation with this. He always felt that West Earth's True Heaven Palace was a sacred ground like Great Thunderclap Monastery and Dao Sect, but even though Palace Master had remarkable divine arts, she was merely a strong practitioner trapped in divine bridge realm. Her sacred ground was no different from the other sacred grounds. However, from the looks of it, West Earth's true Heaven Palace was probably hiding numerous secrets and even a terrifying existence. Not only that, just the name True Heaven Palace gave rise to some possible considerations. Heavenly Saint Cult got its name because of Woodcutter imparting his teachings being revered as a saint. Great Thunderclap Monastery was named that because of Mount Mary's height, its top being located at the lair of thunderclouds. When thunder and Buddha voice resonated together, it was so loud that even the deaf could hear. Dao Sect was famous because of Dao's sword and Kunlun Mountain, while Little Jade Capital was a fragment of founding Emperor Era's Jade Capital. The names of the sacred grounds revealed their origin in a way. So what was the origin of True Heaven Palace? Why did the god of True Heaven Palace destroy sun and moon ships? The ruin of the divine palace in the desert and the strange sand giants were probably the doing of that same god as well. The desert covered in strange flames which made flame markings appear on the abandoned people and attempted to burn them to death. Was it also related to True Heaven Palace? Why would flame markings appear on the abandoned people that stepped onto the land, though? Why would only the abandoned people of great ruins be burned to death while the others felt nothing when they touched the flames? How many secrets were hidden in West Earth? The flaming desert blazed furiously, feeling extremely scorching to Qin Mu. Suddenly, another ruin appeared in front of them, and before the dragon kiln could close in, they saw violent gusts of sand gathering in there. A sand giant gradually took shape, and another was also forming next to it. Violent sand was swirling all around their feet. The dragon kiln was about to take a detour when Qin Mu said, "No need, continue on the way." The dragon kiln could only rush toward the sand giants that were overflowing with murderous intent. Formation markings swirled in Qin Mu's eyes as he surveyed the ruin from afar. The sand giants rushed over and came closer and closer. Suddenly, there was a sword hum as Carefree's sword swooshed along the desert floor. It raised a whirlwind which swept up the sand. The sand giants came to 100 miles away from the dragon kiln before suddenly collapsing. Rolling sand surged forth, and the dragon kiln immediately gave a loud roar, dispersing the crumbling dunes. Qin Mu called back Carefree's sword while the dragon kiln carried him into the ruin. There, he saw a god statue which was sliced into some 8 pieces lying around the shrine. The dragon kiln floated away. We should be able to enter West Earth by tomorrow afternoon. On a broken sun ship, Qin Mu lighted a bonfire and let the dragon kiln and xianxia rest. He could still endure, but the dragon kiln needed to rest after running for so long. It was also hard for xianxia to endure the journey at a young age. Qin Mu looked toward the west, and his gaze passed through the weird flames of the desert. In them, a figure appeared in the distance. Qin Mu smiled and waved his hand. It startled the figure, and it hurriedly escaped. Grandmaster's guts are becoming smaller and smaller. Qin Mu burst out laughing. Pan Gongtso left the broken sunship. His face was flickering between clear and dark. He had already reattached his broken arm, and the injuries he'd suffered were all basically healed. However, he still couldn't manage to sneak up on Qin Mu. It was not that he had never thought of sneak attacking or even facing off with Qin Mu, just that when he realized that his chances of victory weren't high, he could only banish the thoughts. He wanted to leave, but he suddenly saw sand flowing silently in the surroundings, and his heart couldn't help throbbing slightly. He hurriedly looked at the flames. The desert at night wasn't in complete darkness. The flames lighted it up, but by a lot. In the distance, Pan Gongtso saw a strange human figure which looked like a wooden puppet walking over. Its joints warped as it walked in a strange manner. The flowing sand in the desert moved with the puppet's footsteps, and the strange thing was that the sand actually didn't make any sound. Pan Gongtso's heart leaped into his throat when he saw the figure of another wooden puppet followed by the third, and the fourth when they got close. He realized that the strange figures were actually wooden god statues, but their eyes were actually real and not wood. At that moment, they were closing in on the sunship silently. As Pan Gongtso's heart throbbed, one of the wooden god statues turned to look at him, revealing a peculiar smile. It stretched out a wooden finger and placed it by its mouth to make a shush action. Pan Gongtso blinked, but didn't move, watching the god statues moving toward the sunship. The flowing sand surged, carrying the wooden sculptures into the air. The sand mass beneath them became larger and larger. Pan Gongtso grew nervous, his hands forming into fists in a certain excitement. The surroundings of sunship were already sealed off by sand giants. They raised their huge fists high up and prepared to smash down on the sunship in which Qin Mu rested. That Qin brat is a goner. Han Gongzo was so excited he nearly began shouting in joy. At that moment, a silver swordlight swooshed and pierced the head of a wooden god statue. It exploded and was then followed by a second, third, and fourth one. After the explosions, the arms of the sand giants froze in midair before crumbling like flowing sand, burying half of the sun ship. "Fight with me," a sneer came from the ship. Han Gongzo no longer hesitated and turned to leave. There's no chance to succeed when scheming against this brat. However, why is an abandoned person like him coming to West Earth? Is he seeking death? The owner of these wooden god statue, I know her. We've met once, but it wasn't something I like to recall. Hee, Qin brat, even if I want to kill you, why would I need to make my move personally? He smiled. Then again, even if I didn't borrow her power, I still have a few old friends in West Earth, so killing you is simply too easy. Rascal, you dare to oppose me? After you die, I'll make your corpse grovel before me. The next afternoon, the dragon killer finally walked out of the desert, and the flame markings gradually faded from Qin Mu's body. They came to the border town of West Earth where there were many men and women wearing embroidered headbands. Their clothes were gorgeous, full of gold and silver. Those with a higher status wore silver headdress that was sculpted as phoenixes and vermilion birds. The clothes on their bodies were usually red or black and looked dazzling to the eyes. There was an extremely high number of pretty girls while the men looked somewhat plain and simple. When the trio just entered the little town, xianxia whined about wanting to eat sour fish, chili bones, rice flour noodles, and drink bug poop tea. She had left her hometown for more than half a year, and couldn't hold back her excitement at the thought of being able to eat the delicacies of her hometown. She wanted to eat everything at once. West Earth used gold and silver to settle payments, so Qin Mu had brought some and let the girl eat to her content. Qin Mu also got a taste. The food of West Earth tended to be more spicy and sour, having a different taste. However, he didn't dare to try bug poop tea. It was made from the feces of the bug, which ate tea leaves, so even though the tea was unusually fragrant, he was still slightly terrified. Brandbar apothecary likes to drink tea, so I should bring some for him to try, Qin Mu thought to himself. He then examined his surroundings. The architecture of West Earth was quite different from that of Eternal Peace. The local conditions and customs were all different, but the strangest things were the houses. They were constructed from wood and were circular. Many buildings had an inscribed board on which hung a god statue. After inquiring about it, Qin Mu learned that those god statues were used to prevent people from using spells to awaken spirits. Because the spells of West Earth took the path of all things having spirit and all things having soul, if a divine art practitioner executed a spell and a house suddenly stood up and ran away, wouldn't the whole family be left cold and hungry? Only if a god statue was worshipped in the house would it not be summoned away by divine art practitioners. Qin Mu blinked at such an explanation. The sight of a huge cluster of houses standing up to battle was truly something fresh. However, could the god statue really prevent the houses from being taken away by divine arts practitioners? There are also numerous shrines on the mountains used to suppress the mountain spirits. There's also a divine shrine in every river to prevent divine arts practitioners from taking them away. However, those mountains and rivers all have owners, an elder explained. Qin Mu looked around and clicked his tongue in wonder. When looking at the mountain stretching into the distance, he finally understood why the mountain range of West Earth hadn't yet been razed to the ground. The land still had verdant hills and limpid water, which was a pleasant scenery. Why do all the mountains and rivers here have owners? Qin Mu asked. Who are they? They, of course, belong to the masters of True Heaven Palace. There are also some that belong to divine arts practitioners of some place or some sect, the elder said. Not only do the mountains and rivers have owners, even flowers, grass, and trees all have owners. They can't be carelessly touched, otherwise, even selling oneself won't be enough to pay up. As he was saying that, the ground gently trembled, and the people around became flustered. They hurriedly dodged to the side, and Qin Mu looked toward the origin of the sound, where he saw a tree walking over. On it stood a woman who was holding a painted scroll. She shouted loudly, "An escapee from great ruins entered our West Earth today. True Heaven Palace has ordered to capture this fugitive. Come, hand this portrait up." Tales of Herding Gods, Chapter 446. The Maidens on the Chest. The woman wore a black top and black skirt, while silver accessories adorned her head. There were also over a dozen silver bracelets with bells on her wrists. Her appearance was impressive, and soon a person walked over to take the portrait from her hand to hang it on the announcement board. The woman of True Heaven Palace looked down at them from high above and said, "This fugitive from Great Ruins is extremely important. I will come from the Flaming Desert in the next few days, so you guys have to be alert. If you see him, don't make a commotion so he won't be alerted." Xianxia wanted to run over to look, but Qin Mu grabbed her tiny hand to prevent her from getting lost. There was a large crowd in front of the announcement board, and it was impenetrable. However, Xianxia still managed to squeeze all the way forward while pulling Qin Mu behind her. He then raised his head to see himself on the painting. On top of it were written Great Ruins Fugitive Qin Mu. Xianxia was both surprised and delighted. "Fatty Dragon, you're also beside Big Brother. Only I'm missing up. Dated BYBOX Novelcom. The surroundings had been full of noise moments ago, but everyone fell silent at that moment. They looked at Qin Mu. He seemed to not notice anything as he looked at the announcement board with a smile. "This is the work of Pan Gong Tso. He painted it personally. Zhengan also had a portrait of me which was drawn by him, so I can recognize his strokes." Whoosh! The surroundings instantly emptied as the crowd dispersed, moving as far away from him as possible. Qin Mu paid no mind to it, and continued to smile. Grandmaster still has a wide circle of friends and knows quite a lot of people. It's a pity he ran too fast, and I didn't manage to kill him. Great Ruins Fugitive, die. An angry shout came from behind him, followed by a whoosh as the tree man raised its gigantic feet to step on him. The tree man was incomparably heavy and its power was immense. Since there were a lot of trees and their prices weren't high, divine arts practitioners of West Earth would usually choose them as their main transportation and weapon in battle. The tree man that the female disciple of True Heaven Palace had chosen was of a different breed, though. Its branches, trunk, and leaves were crimson like blood, and based on its appearance, it seemed to have gone through numerous battles, gaining quite an awe-inspiring air about itself. Qin Mu stretched out his hand in a grabbing motion, and a ball of green light flew out from the tree man's body, which froze it in place. Qin Mu had taken out the soul of the tree. Xianxia had imparted 10,000 spirit nature technique to him, so even though he felt that it wasn't as easy for men to cultivate as to women, he had still put in quite some effort into it. The disciple of True Heaven Palace was astonished, and the silver accessories on her head suddenly flew up, transforming into a silver phoenix that rushed at Qin Mu. The silver bracelets on her arms also flew out to encase his head. Flames blazed around Qin Mu's body, and before the silver phoenix and silver bracelets could even reach him, they turned into a puddle of molten metal. The female disciple of True Heaven Palace saw that her situation was bad, and immediately turned to leave. Her clothes fluttered and brought her to soar into the sky. She didn't even have to use any flying spells. 10,000 spirit nature technique is really miraculous. Even the clothes can allow one to fly, Qin Mu exclaimed with admiration. "Seems like I have still underestimated this technique." The woman grunted and fell from the sky. Big trouble. The crowd in the surroundings fled in all directions while shouting among themselves. "A lowly man is going to kill a female master." Qin Mu looked around and saw that the street was already empty. The doors and windows of all the houses were shut, and there wasn't a soul in the surroundings. Only the dragon Kilin and Xianxia were still standing beside him, while the female disciple of True Heaven Palace was sprawled on the ground. The fall had stunned her. "Do you know how to reach True Heaven Palace?" Qin Mu asked with a friendly expression. That female disciple of True Heaven Palace suddenly flipped forward, and the hairpins in her head shot toward his eyes like swords. She quickly moved to a house beside the street, and she raised her hand to pluck down the god statue on the inscribed board. Boom! The house suddenly stood up and transformed into a giant. The two small rooms became the fists which smashed down on Qin Mu. The hairpins froze in place when they got near Qin Mu's eyes. The formations in them swirled, and the hairpins melted into droplets of molten silver. Qin Mu raised his head, and the starlight shone in his eyes, sweeping toward the house giant. Through a window, he could see a family shivering inside and not daring to move. I knew these god statues had no use. Two beams of light shot out from his eyes and swept past the female disciple of True Heaven Palace. He said indifferently, "As divine arts practitioners, you care nothing about these ordinary people. I despise you." The two beams became shorter and shorter, returning back into his eyes. The formations that were swirling crazily vanished, and the stars gradually dimmed. The house giant landed down with a crash and transformed back into a circular house. Qin Mu turned to leave as the woman on the roof froze. She didn't dare to move. When Qin Mu picked Xianxia and jumped onto the dragon Killin's back, the sound of the door opening came from below. The female disciple of True Heaven Palace revealed a look of terror and lowered her voice. "Don't open the door," creak. The door slowly opened more, and the woman screamed, "Don't open the door." Her vital Kai couldn't stabilize her body anymore, and bloodlines appeared on her neck and waist. 2 chunks of flesh then slid off from her waist and tumbled down to the street. Her 2 legs fell off the roof afterward. Cult Master is really benevolent. Outside the small town, the dragon killing couldn't help exclaiming in admiration. That woman was so ruthless, yet Cult Master. Just as he said that, he heard the screams of the woman behind him, so he turned back to look. He was just in time to see the sight of her lower body falling off. This made him unable to resist a shiver. Qin Mu sighed ruefully. "I'm not benevolent. For divine arts practitioners, to put their hands on ordinary people is already considered a taboo. We are all human, so how can we recklessly take the lives of others just because we're stronger? When I was in Eternal Peace Empire and Great Ruins, the battles between divine arts practitioners rarely involved the innocent. Even when I fought with Pangonzo, we also fought outside the city. When Granny C fought with Border Dragon, City Lord, she had also done so in the sky above the city instead of recklessly going at each other among the common folk in the streets." The dragon killer shut his mouth and didn't continue the conversation. He had originally planned on praising Qin Mu's benevolence for not taking the life of that female disciple of True Heaven Palace, but he hadn't expected she would still end up killed by him. The benevolence that Qin Mu mentioned was only targeted at the ordinary people. Ever since he was young, Qin Mu had been taught by the 9 elders of Disabled Elderly Village, learning from their words and examples. Even though he carried the title of Heavenly Devil Cult Master, he could still clearly differentiate between right and wrong. Based on that point alone, he had surpassed many of the righteous people in most of the reputable sects. Care should know the direction of True Heaven Palace, right? Qin Mu asked. Xianxia shook her head. "My mother brought me out to avoid pursuit, so we walked through many desolate places, and I don't remember the path back." Qin Mu muttered to himself irresolutely for a moment before saying, "Fatty Dragon, let's head along the official road. We can ask for the way once we reach a big city. The people there should know the direction of True Heaven Palace." The dragon killing followed the official road and covered dozens of miles. Gradually, there were more and more people traveling on land. The road was very wide and flat, much better than in Eternal Peace. The river beside the road was also so clear that the bottom could be seen. There were fish turtles and snakes, and they were all not small. There was also divine arts practitioners and martial arts practitioners hurrying on their way over the water. The women were in the majority, but there was also quite some men. The technique that those people cultivated most likely also followed the path of all things having spirits and all things having soul. Some of the women and men would stop on the river's surface and call out to it. Waves would instantly rise up high, speeding them forward. There were also passers-by on the road, and many of them were hurrying on their way on tree men. There were also vine men, but their speed was slower. There were also divine arts practitioners riding all kinds of flying beasts in the sky. Their multicolored wings reflected light, making them very eye-catching. "Seems like we are close to the city." Qin Mu let out a sigh after seeing the increasing number of people. Suddenly, clattering sounds rang out, and Qin Mu instantly saw a strange sight. Numerous maidens rushed out from a call and flipped many small mountains in a rush to the main road. What was carrying those maidens was a huge chest, which was over a dozen feet large. It took wide strides and ran very quickly. Some more girls rushed out from a village nearby, but what they were riding was a wooden boat. It had also grown feet and was running on land. Qin Mu was dumbfounded. It was as though the chest and wooden boat had turned into spirits, able to sprint like the dragon killing. It was truly weird. There's anything and everything in the boundless world, and the spells and divine arts of other places can also be used by Eternal Peace. If this kind of spell was promoted to Eternal Peace Empire, wouldn't that be wonderful? Qin Mu blinked and thought to himself, however, it would cause some confusion, wouldn't it? I reckon those with strong magic power would probably ride mountains to show off. The girls were very curious about the dragon killing he was riding, and the huge chest with over a dozen legs came over. It was very big and numerous yards in length and width. There were also silk cushions that were like clouds laid out on the top. 7 girls sat on them as they examined the dragon killing and Qin Mu. The girl in the lead should have been their leader, and it was her who was using her magic power to control the chest, making it carry them forward. She looked very pretty when she smiled, and the huge eyes under the tassels weaved by silver pendants were like crescents. Her voice had a unique accent of West Earth, but before she even spoke, she already started giggling. "Little Bobber, your big pig runs really fast. Where did you get it?" Qin Mu was stunned for a moment, then came to realization that little Bubber was probably little brother. He smiled and said, "This is a dragon killin, a mixed breed between a dragon and a killin." Xianxia popped out from the dragon killin's fur and revealed her small head that looked around with curiosity. The girls were surprised and found the little girl to their liking, wanting to kiss and hug her. Qin Mu was helpless and could only let the dragon killin move closer to them. He brought Xianxia up and sent her onto the chest. He started chatting with the girls and found out that the reason they were surprised was because he was bringing Xianxia along. West Earth's social customs were different from what he was familiar with. After a man and a woman went through visiting marriage, if a child was born, the son would be sent to the man's house while the daughter would be kept by the woman. This social custom resulted in a strange situation in West Earth. The families were either all female or all male, and numerous villages were made up of solely men or women. When the girls saw Qin Mu bringing Xianxia, they thought she was his daughter. However, looking at how Qin Mu wasn't that old and looked like a sunshine bright boy, they changed their minds. He didn't look too young to have kids, so they couldn't help becoming astonished. "Little sisters, can I ask you girls about something?" Qin Mu was puzzled by the social customs there and probed. "I've met a girl once, and she invited me to her house, but she told me not to walk through the main door, but flip through her window instead. What etiquette is this?" The girls all started to giggle, and the eyes of the girl in the lead curved into crescents again. Perhaps little Bubber isn't silly. When a girl asks you to flip through the window, it means she wants to smooch with you, just like how the necks of the mandarin ducks coiled together, rubbing against each other. Qin Mu scratched his head in puzzlement. "What mandarin duck coiling?" The girl in the lead jumped onto the dragon killin's head and smiled. "Don't move." After she said that, she leaned into his chest and grabbed his hands to put on her chest. She moved her face over, and her long neck went into his embrace. She rubbed her face against his, and her earlobes touched with his, giving him a smooth and intimate feeling that was indescribably soft and charming. Qin Mu's face flushed as he was left at a loss. All he could smell was the fragrance of the girl. She chuckled and returned back to her chest. The other girls looked at his intoxicated look and all laughed loudly in delight. "Big sister, was your heart moved? Why don't you take him for visiting marriage?" One girl even teased. She took a glance at Qin Mu, and her heart was pretty moved. She said hesitantly, "It's just if he is willing or not." The other girls also nudged her, and she took a fragrance pouch out, throwing it to Qin Mu with a giggle. "Little Bubber, you can climb through my window tonight. I'll teach you how the mandarin ducks do it." The women in West Earth were daring and much more fiery than the girls in Eternal Peace Capital. Qin Mu felt that he couldn't digest all that was happening, and immediately changed the topic. "Do you know how to reach True Heaven Palace?" Tales of Herding Gods Chapter 447 look like talented people. Even though the girls had cultivated some spells of West Earth and knew there was a place called True Heaven Palace, they didn't know its exact place. West Earth was vast, no smaller than Eternal Peace or Great Ruins. Most of the people living in the latter knew about Dao's sect, but most of them also didn't know where it was located. The people of West Earth were the same. Qin Mu was slightly regretting killing that female disciple of True Heaven Palace. In front, a magnificent city appeared in his eyes, and the maiden said that they were there for the fair. The city was called Fragrant Bloom City, and was full of fresh flowers blossoming. Green vines crept over the city walls, and huge blooms rested on the wall. The tower was also draped with fresh flowers that bloomed in beautiful purples and brilliant reds. They were very eye-catching. Upon coming closer, Qin Mu saw that those flowers were spirit-like, since beautiful maidens came out from within them. They gently sang folk songs that he didn't understand after having been awakened by spells of the people in the city. They adorned the scenery of Fragrant Bloom City. There were Synapsis maidens wearing green dresses, and begonia maidens carrying brilliant red flowers among the tall buildings. Dated by box NOVEL. There were also giants formed by rocks knocking on drums, and unknown flowers floating in the sky. Their spirits played flutes and peepers as they accompanied the giants. Qin Mu felt like a country bumpkin. Humongous objects were walking on the streets, and they were houses which had grown feet. Boys and girls stood at the windows, looking around and giggling loud and clear. There were also streamers fluttering in the wind, flying out from one window to another, forming bridges. Girls wearing all kinds of splendid clothes stepped on the streamers to cross the distance and meet their loved ones. "It's Flowery Mountain Festival," Xianxia said excitedly. "My mother brought me to play here before. True Heaven Palace's Flowery Mountain Festival is even more bustling than this." Qin Mu parted ways with the maidens on the chest. The dragon kiln carried them down the magnificent street. The flourishing sight of West Earth was unimaginable. It was worlds apart from eternal peace. But it also had an unusual appeal. They walked through the city, which was filled with numerous girls throwing fragrance pouches at Qin Mu. There was even a daring one who stepped on a streamer and came over to pull his hand to rendezvous in the building giant. Qin Mu let go of the girl's hand, and she was like a fairy when she floated back into the building, going off to look for other handsome men. The disciple of True Heaven Palace he had met in West Earth was extremely fierce, and he didn't have a good impression of the women of West Earth. But after coming to Fragrant Bloom City, he was attracted by the local conditions and customs. Flowery Mountain Festival that happened once every year was extraordinarily bustling. Qin Mu passed through the crowd, building giants and house giants until he finally reached the center of the city. It was much quieter and less lively. One of the people living here should be the landlord of Fragrant Bloom City. I should be able to get news of True Heaven Palace from him or other important personas. At that moment, a green vine grew rapidly and floated to Qin Mu's face. There was a huge flower on the tip of the vine, which suddenly bloomed. A girl in pink popped out from the flower and smiled sweetly. "Are you young Master Qin?" Qin Mu nodded. That woman walked out of the flower, but there was a stamen connected to her back. She smiled. "Young Master, my owner has an invitation for you. Please follow me. There's someone here who knows me." Astonished, Qin Mu climbed down from the dragon killen's back. "Lady, please lead the way." The woman also landed on the ground and led them to a huge house that was like a manor, looking pretty imposing in style. The two stone lions stood up and turned around to look at Qin Mu and the dragon killen before squatting back down on the stone platform. Qin Mu followed the lady in the flower into the house and saw numerous young men and women coming to and fro. It was very bustling, but they were mostly people changed from flowers, grass, trees, and jade. There were even some that were of black gold and black copper. This manor isn't in the style of West Earth, but that of Eternal Peace. Wait a moment. These black gold and black copper. Qin Mu was slightly stunned when his gaze fell on a working cauldron with food inside. It jumped onto the head of a man of fire to cook the food inside itself. This huge cauldron is a spirit weapon. Even spirit weapon can transform into spirit. Qin Mu suddenly felt like everything had become clear. He couldn't help slowing down and entering into a daze. He could sense another shortcut for the reform. It was bringing the ideology of all things having spirits and all things having souls into eternal peace, which would raise another wave of reform. If the spirit weapons of Eternal Peace's divine arts practitioners could gain spirit, everyone's ability could be raised tremendously. Not only that, with the merge of the two kinds of systems, more spells and divine arts could be created and could become even more versatile. The spirit weapons of the divine arts practitioners of Eternal Peace Empire weren't truly spirit weapons, for they were merely born and nurtured in the divine treasure. But if they absorbed the ideology of West Earth, they could become spirit weapons in the truest sense. The spells of Eternal Peace place importance on attack power, and there are all kinds of strange techniques and miraculous skills. The spells of West Earth are inferior in attack power, and they also lack offensive methods. However, the method of all things having spirit could allow spirit weapons to become true spirit weapons. With two kinds of systems, we could complement each other. The most difficult problem was only how to merge the spells of all things having spirit from West Earth with the techniques of Eternal Peace Empire, allowing the divine arts practitioners of Eternal Peace Empire to sense the spirits and awaken them inside the spirit weapons. It's a man. Qin Mu was puzzled. Fragrant Bloom City was obviously an extremely flourishing city, so by right, it should have been a woman who was in charge of the household. Why was there then a situation in which a man was situated at a high position? He looked once more at a handsome young man welcoming him. The youth gave him a familiar feeling, and he felt like he'd seen him somewhere before, even if he was sure he had never met him before. The dragon killen suddenly became excited and said in a low voice, "Cult Master, do you think he looks slightly similar to Patriarch?" Qin Mu was stunned. He indeed felt that the two looked similar and couldn't help having a favourable impression of him. He greeted, "Heavenly Saint Cult Master Qin Mu pays his respects to the owner of this place." The youth returned his greeting, and his etiquette was that of Eternal Peace Empire. "Cult Master Qin, Jiki pays his respect to you. Not long ago, Cult Master's portrait has been spread throughout the whole of West Earth, and your reputation rose and gave rise to a commotion. Many young talents are planning on meeting Cult Master Qin. Over here please, Cult Master Qin." Qin Mu's face darkened. Since he brought xianxia with him, he had planned to have Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor and xianxia to be the vanguard. The reputations were much far spread than his, as one was the reputable imperial preceptor of Eternal Peace Empire, while the other one was the former palace master of True Heaven Palace. They would naturally catch West Earth's attention, and in that case, no one would notice him and xianxia, which would make their journey much safer. His motive for coming was to familiarize himself with the social customs of West Earth. In the future, Eternal Peace Empire would definitely move their troops here and annex this place, adding it to its territory. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's goal was a top-down approach. By getting True Heaven Palace into their hands before calling war and having it surrender and pay allegiance to Eternal Peace could minimize the casualties by a lot. But Qin Mu hadn't expected that because of Pangongtso, that scoundrel's meddling, his presence in West Earth would be known by the whole world, while his wanted posters would fill every city and town in West Earth. Brother Jiki is courteous. Qin Mu walked with him and saw that the men and women around Jiki were all not weak, possessing quite remarkable abilities. However, they were all throwing unpleasant looks at him, unable to wait for a fight. But with Jiki as the landowner, they didn't make a move directly. Qin Mu looked at Jiki and was slightly suspicious. The young man looked somewhat similar to the young patriarch, and the manner was also in the style of Eternal Peace Empire and not West Earth circular construction. Jiki's etiquette was also the familiar one, so could he really be the result of Patriarch going to West Earth for a visiting marriage? That's not right. He doesn't look too old, but some 16, 17 years old. Even though Patriarch is slightly charismatic and flirtatious, he was still just a bunch of old bones 17 years ago. So how could he still run over to West Earth for a visiting marriage? Then again, Patriarch also looked like a youth, so Jiki might have also cultivated the cultivation techniques in great educational heavenly devil scriptures, and this halted his aging. Jiki led everyone to a tall building, and there were vehicles arriving from everywhere. The people coming had to have extraordinary status. Qin Mu saw some which rode on clouds, which were tied to an ancient tree. There were all kinds of strange beasts and even a small mountain. The people who could enter the manor could only be those who had quite a reputation. They all looked young, and were probably various important figures coming to attend Flowery Mountain Festival. After all, no one would choose an old man or old woman as their partner for Flowery Mountain Festival. Jiki invited them to take their seats, and Qin Mu suppressed the doubt in his heart while sitting down. Jiki clapped his hands, and a servant fetched a painting. The young host unscrolled it, and it portrayed none other the Devil Cult Master. He then said, with a smile, True Heaven Palace sent Cult Master Qin's painting over, and said that you're a fugitive from great ruins. I wondered if this daring Cult Master Qin would enter my fragrant bloom city, but I never thought that he would really do it. Cult Master Qin has remarkable skills and huge guts, so come and take a look at the elites of my West Earth. The female hero here is our fragrant bloom city's Yu Jingfeng with a deep family background. The reason why Sister Yu's surname is Yu is because her ancestor is from the branch of West Earth's Yu family. Why Cult Master Qin should know it, right? Qin Mu nodded and said, The Palace Master of True Heaven Palace today belongs to Yu family. Jiki smiled and said, Sister Yu is 10,000 grand fields, 18 mountain ranges, and is the successor of Yu family. Her cultivation is on 7 stars realm. Qin Mu nodded at Yu Jingfeng with a smile. She gave a slight smile in return. Jiki then spoke again. There are also men who are in charge of households in West Earth. This is the young master of West Earth's Heavenly Province sect, Yu Kenshin. Heavenly Province sect is led by men, and their cultivation methods are similar to those of Eternal Peace Empire. They are quite well known in West Earth. Brother Yu Kengshin's cultivation is on 6 directions realm. Qin Mu greeted him. Yu Kengshin was rather conceited and said, Even though I'm on 6 directions realm, the spells and divine arts of my Heavenly Province sect have ancient origins. They were imparted to us by gods. Qin Mu's interest was aroused, and he said with a smile, I've seen a lot of techniques of gods. They are indeed not bad. Now this lady is extraordinary, but she's not from our fragrant bloom city. She's from True Heaven Palace. Senior Sister Tingfang, Jiki said. Qin Mu looked at that woman and saw that she was coming forward in splendid clothes. She had extraordinary good looks, and he praised, a garden full of blossoms. Senior Sister Tingfang has a nice name. Tingfang smiled and said, Cult Master Qin, the elders in the palace want to bring you to justice. It's not me who's against you, so please pardon me. Jiki then introduced everyone else, and that had quite the backgrounds. Qin Mu smiled at every single one of them. The cultivations of those people were high, and they were considered quite impressive in the younger generation. Once the introduction was concluded, Qin Mu smiled and asked, "Brother Jiki has introduced so many people, so why don't you introduce yourself?" Jiki laughed and said, "I'm just the landowner of this place. Fragrant Bloom City is a property that my parents left for me, and is nothing worth mentioning. Cult Master Qin, with all the elites coming forth and wanting to take you down, how will you react?" Qin Mu looked around and said sincerely, "Brothers and sisters, you all look like talented people, so why did you come to die?" Tales of Herding Gods Chapter 448 Patriarch's Descendant. Once Jiki said that everyone in the building sneered endlessly. Qin Mu paid no attention to it and smiled. If it wasn't great ruins separating West Earth and eternal peace, West Earth would have been long ago wiped out by eternal peace. Truth be told, your paths, skills, and divine arts have already fallen behind times compared to those of eternal peace, whose spells and divine arts are slightly behind times too in my eyes. So I'm seeking change. Brothers and sisters of West Earth, it's too dangerous to be this close to me. Not to mention those of Six Directions Realm, even the brothers and sisters of Seven Stars Realm. You, and you. When you're so close to me, in my eyes updated by box novel comp, he pointed at the experts of Seven Stars Realm present and shook his head. You guys are all merely corpses that can move and talk. The only question is when you guys will become corpses. Everyone was overflowing with murderous intent. Yu Kenshin suddenly stood up and sneered. Cult Master Qin, how arrogant of you. City Lord Jiki, you're the owner of this place, and I would very much like to meet this Cult Master Qin. Is it possible? Jiki laughed and said, "Everyone here is guests attending Flowery Mountain Festival of Fragrant Bloom City, so why do we need to draw our daggers? Everyone should find a lover they admire and have a fun night. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Of course, if everyone is insistent on fighting, I won't be able to stop you guys, will I?" It was clear that he wanted to watch a show. Yu Kenshin walked out of the building while sneering. Cult Master Qin, come out. I want to profit from True Heaven Palace. Qin Mu revealed a smile and took out a 2-foot metal ball while shaking his head. No need to go down. It's pretty good here. He lifted the metal ball in his hand, and the building instantly shook slightly, gradually sinking into the ground. The building started to creak, and its first level sunk into the ground, followed by the second level, then the third level. Only then did it stop. Everyone was astonished, and Jiki praised. What a heavy ball. Everyone, please take a look. Qin Mu's left hand gently stirred the metal ball as he said, "This is my sword pellet. Catcher." The sword pellet split open and 8,000 swords, as fine as thread, spilled out. Their tips were pointed at the center of the ball. To be able to forge something so exquisite, one not only needed to have extreme craftsmanship, they also needed calculation techniques of the same level. Cold light reflected off the 8,000 swords, and the 4 walls of the building flowed continuously with lights. They even shone on everyone's faces. Every sword was like the most perfect work of art. Qin Mu lifted the sword pellet up, and it slowly floated up to spin slowly, allowing everyone to see its interior structure. Everyone, without improvement, paths, skills, and divine arts would fall behind times in 100 years, let alone 1,000. Your West Earth's paths, skills, and divine arts were imparted to your ancestors 20,000 years ago to awaken the soul or spirit of all things so they could battle by themselves. However, the activation speed of your divine arts is too slow, and even experts of Celestial Being Realm require a fixed time to activate them. However, divine arts have myriad changes in an instant, so who would give you the time? Let me execute a sword skill so everyone here can give me pointers. Don't move. True Heaven Palace's Ting Fang sneered. If we don't move, aren't we just going to let you kill us? Qin Mu smiled slightly and said, if you want to move, you'll have to pay the consequences. Sword of Founding Emperor. The sword pellet in his hand suddenly split open and swords filled the entire building. When 8,000 swords moved, almost everyone couldn't resist standing up to defend themselves. At that moment, all of the sword light suddenly vanished, and along with them, even the buildings seemed to have vanished as well. What replaced it was a sea of blood that covered both heaven and earth. The second move of sword picture, Sword of Founding Emperor, Sea of Blood. Once this move was executed, the vast and mournful feeling came sweeping over. Everyone felt like they could see countless gods and devils struggling in the sea of blood and yelling. Next, they became corpses in the sword lights and sunk into the sea of blood. Sword of Founding Emperor, Sea of Blood. Mountains and rivers exist. vast and obscure heart, looking around left and right. No more people donning the clothes of homeland. At that moment, they heard someone slamming the table and someone shouting angrily. There was also the sound of divine arts colliding, and a brief period of clashing. Suddenly, the colour of the sea of blood faded away like fleeting time, and they could see the back view of a man carrying a divine sword and turning his head back. Loneliness and decrepitness plucked on their heartstrings. The back view vanished, and the building appeared once again. Qin Mu's hand was still lifted up, and in his palm was a sword pellet, which was swirling non-stop. All the plates and bowls, as well as the dishes in front of the guests, remained the same as earlier, untouched. Cold sweat broke out on everyone's foreheads, and they hurriedly looked around with frightened eyes. They saw Yu Jinfen's corpse, and that Ting Fang had collapsed on her seat with a red bloodstain at the heart of her brows. There was also 2 corpses of the servants. They had slammed the table in Qin Mu's sword light and tried to contend with his sword light. The only result of that was their deaths. The other people had not moved, and so they were safe. Yu Kenshin's face was pale white, but he hadn't moved. It wasn't because he couldn't see Qin Mu's terrifying sword well. On the contrary, he had clearly felt it, which was why he didn't dare to move. Ji Qi waved his hand, and there were people who immediately went forward to drag the corpses out. On the seats, everyone's faces were pale white, and some were even ashen. Their astonishment brought by Qin Mu's move was simply too strong. The sword skill was too fast and made them unable to react. They could only sit there, and this kind of helplessness while awaiting death was not pleasant. It was especially so for the experts of Seven Stars Realm. Even though they could let their primordial spirits leave their bodies, the battle power of the primordial spirit was too strong, and the building was too cramped up. Qin Mu's sword was extremely fast, and the sword lights had drowned them before they could even react. Qin Mu's move had an immense power, and every sword had been made using the best materials. Thus everyone's lives were on the line. On top of that, their divine arts of all things having spirits and all things having souls were indeed much slower than Qin Mu's sword in activation speed. If they were to fight, they could only try to pull a distance away from him before trying to execute their arts. Because of that, in a building, they didn't have any chance at all. Qin Mu put away his sword pellet and apologized. Brother Ji Qi, I hope you will pardon me for dirtying your building. The exquisiteness of Cult Master Qin's sword skill is unmatched, opening my horizons. Even though you struck with countless swords, you didn't damage my building at all. This is then true ability. May I ask if this move is a sword move, which was founded after Eternal Peace Empire's reform? Qin Mu shook his head. This move isn't a divine art from after the reform, but was founded 400 to 500 years ago. This move has also fallen behind times, but in West Earth, I can use it to kill all 6 directions and 7 stars practitioners. No one is my match. Even though everyone here is very strong, you're all still inferior to Pan Gongtso. He is much stronger than all of you, able to take this move of mine. At most he will only be heavily injured. Everyone snorted coldly and wanted to say something, but their throats were all hoarse. Their voices were also trembling, and they immediately coughed to cover it up. City Lord Ji Qi, I have no face to remain here. Farewell. Yu Kenshin suddenly cupped his hands and turned to leave. The moment he did so, other people also rose to bid farewell. Soon, the building was only left with Qin Mu and his host. Cult Master Qin, you didn't bring many experts with you this time. Only a dragon killing on Celestial Being Realm. On the other hand, my West Earth is full of experts, so aren't you afraid of dying here? Ji Qi asked curiously. Qin Mu smiled in a way that wasn't exactly smiling. Brother Ji Qi knows the dragon killing. Ji Qi didn't reply and Qin Mu smiled. There are many people who want to kill me, but as of yet, no one has ever succeeded. My journey this time wasn't to challenge all the elites in the world, but to tour the place and explore it. Does Brother Ji Qi know where's True Heaven Palace? True Heaven Palace is the sacred ground of our West Earth, and everyone knows it. Ji Qi smiled and said, if Cult Master Qin wants to go there, I can point the way for you. Qin Mu gave his thanks and smiled. True Heaven Palace is after me, yet Brother Ji Qi treats me like a guest of honor. Aren't you afraid True Heaven Palace might cause trouble for you? Ji Qi laughed loudly and shook his head. Even though True Heaven Palace is strong, they're not at the point of behaving unscrupulously. Even though there's only the sacred ground in the whole of West Earth, it's not True Heaven Palace that's ruling West Earth, but High Heavens. True Heaven Palace won't alarm High Heavens just for this small matter. Come, my man, gift a copy of our West Earth's geographic map to Cult Master Qin. Qin Mu grew solemn. Key words had revealed an important piece of information. True Heaven Palace and High Heaven seemed to have some sort of relationship. A servant came forward and offered the geographic map of West Earth to Qin Mu. As he took it, he couldn't resist asking, City Lord Key, your manor seems to have been built in the style of eternal peace. Key smiled. Cult Master Qin, you should go. Killing Ting Fang of True Heaven Palace and Yu Jinfang of Yu family is a huge trouble by itself. Those people who left in a hurry aren't going to attend Flowery Mountain Festival, but will report and call for reinforcements. If you don't go, you won't be able to leave anymore. Qin Mu looked him deeply in the eyes and asked, how long did Patriarch stay here? Key fell silent. Then after a moment, he said, not for long. He would come once a year and teach me a lot of stuff. The last time he left, he told me he might never come again. Cult Master Qin, is he gone? Qin Mu was silent for a moment, then came to a window to look at the dragon kiln below. At this moment, the behemoth had straightened his ears, and it was obvious that he was trying to eavesdrop on the conversation above. No. Qin Mu revealed a smile and said, Patriarch has probably become a god. Below, the dragon kiln's ear lowered once again, and he just lay down on the ground with its tail spread out. Key came to his side and looked down. He saw xianxia climbing onto the tip of the dragon kiln's tail. The big fellow then raised it to let xianxia slide down, causing this little girl to giggle non-stop with joy. I've met the dragon kiln when I was young, but he doesn't seem to remember me. Key shook his head. You are bringing the little princess of True Heaven Palace, and you still plan to reach the place alive. No wonder True Heaven Palace wants you to be captured so bad. Do you really don't need my help? For me to become the lord of a city, I naturally have some abilities and tricks. Father had taught me quite a lot of stuff. Qin Mu walked out of the building while shaking his head. You have your own family, and I won't implicate you. Fatty Dragon, Kiver, let's go. Key saw them out of the manor, and waved. Qin Mu seemed to notice it and turned back to wave back at him. Key couldn't resist asking one last question. Can I meet him again? After you become a god, you'll probably see him, Qin Mu shouted back loudly. Key smiled while seeing them off, but his expression dimmed when they were out of sight. Every time he mentions father, he says probably. Father really is gone. Tales of Herding Gods Chapter 449 Big Bronze Bell. The dragon kiln, on the other hand, was very happy. He became more hardworking as he ran while carrying Qin Mu. He was as fast as lightning, much faster than he was in the desert. Even though his thoughts were far-reaching at times, he still wasn't someone like Key. When he heard Qin Mu saying that Patriarch had not yet died to Patriarch's son, but that he had become a god, the big fatty couldn't help celebrating and deciding to work much harder. Qin Mu found it hard to lie to him. In a sea of fog in the living realm of the dead, Taoist Ling Jing was the boatman, Qin Mu thought to himself. Based on that, Patriarch should be in the living realm of the dead as well. Village chief gave me 8 Fengdu coins, so I must go there once more and find the answer for myself. He took out the geographical map that Key had gifted him and unfolded it to look around. After a moment, he found the location of True Heaven Palace and Fragrant Bloom City. He then raised his head to determine his location and immediately told the dragon kiln to sprint in the southwest direction. Right in front of them, a huge mountain stretched across the horizon, but it was somewhat strange. It was like a giant standing with 2 mountain peaks hanging downwards from its shoulders. But what was weird was that when the 2 mountain peaks came to the bottom, they became thick and circular, like 2 huge bells hanging above ground. While riding toward there, Qin Mu had 2 choices. He could cross between the 2 bells or take a detour around the strange body of the huge mountain. When the dragon kiln sprinted over, Qin Mu raised his head and saw an elegant woman in black floating up the mountain. She landed on its top, and there was a golden paper that looked like a seal near her. Qin Mu's pupil contracted, and he saw that the woman was tearing off that paper on the mountain. Not good. Fatty Dragon, rush through. Just as he said that, the huge mountain suddenly rumbled, and it raised its feet. The incomparably heavy mountain uprooted itself from the ground. Qin Mu knew that it was bad, and Carefree Sword immediately flew out of the sheath behind him. The sword whizzed through the air and went straight for the woman on the mountain peak. To catch bandits, first catch the ringleader. The mountain giant definitely required the magic power of a strong practitioner to sustain it. As long as the woman was killed, Qin Mu should be able to stop the transformation process. The woman turned back to take a look at him and sneered. Since you dared to kill a disciple of my Yu family, even if you are the father of the emperor, who cares? I'll send you to follow her. The mountain giant pulled out a leg and stomped on the ground. splattering mud in all directions. It then pulled out the other leg, slowly standing up. When the mountain giant stood up, the clouds were at its waist, and the two bell-shaped peaks were also raised. Rocks rolled down the secondary peaks, and when the huge chunks crashed down from the sky, they soon piled up on the road. The woman remained standing on the giant's head. Carefree Sword instantly spun, and transformed into Drill Sword form to rush into the clouds. The woman from Yu family knew that her situation was also bad. She immediately shouted, and flying hoops flew out. They went to bind Carefree Sword, which was rushing at her from below. Ding, ding, dingy ding. Concentrated explosions rang out like rain. The flying hoops bound up Carefree's sword, and rapidly shrunk. However, they were immediately shredded into pieces by the spinning sword. The woman's cultivation wasn't weak, but the techniques of West Earth didn't take the path of strengthening themselves. Instead, they borrowed all things in the heaven and earth to fight, so their own battle power was much weaker when compared to that of divine arts practitioners of Eternal Peace Empire on the same realm. When compared to Qin Mu, this heavenly devil cult master who had made his way by killing everything on the way, the woman was much inferior. Carefree Sword was a divine sword, and its sharpness was unmatched. After shredding all the hoops, its momentum didn't slow down at all. The sword pierced the woman's mandible and came out from the other side of her head. A trail of blood appeared on the mountain peak. Qin Mu called back his Carefree Sword back, but before he could let out a sigh of relief, he saw that when the mountain rocks fell from the two secondary peaks, they revealed the bodies of brass bells. The two peaks had really been bells, and not mountains. They had only been covered by a layer of rocks. Even though Qin Mu had seen quite a number of such huge spirit weapons before, they were all cult legacy treasures. Even though the spirit weapons of West Earth weren't as exquisite as the spirit weapons in Eternal Peace Empire, cult legacy treasures were still extraordinary. They were treasures that contained the meticulous care of a strong practitioner throughout their entire life. That paper on the mountain peak should have been sealing this mountain giant. It should have been awakened long ago, and then sealed by its owner to suppress the precious treasure of the family. The corners of Qin Mu's eyes twitched, for he realized that their situation had just turned for the worse. The mountain giant raised the two huge bells and swung them without explanation. They collided with each other, and their openings were right toward Qin Mu. The mountain giant wasn't awakened, but simply sealed before. It always had spirit, which was why Yu family had sealed it here. When it was needed, they just had to peel away the seal, and could mobilize the terrifying giant. Bang! The two huge bells collided, and a sound wave came rushing forward. Wherever it passed, the road would rise up and turn toward the dragon kiln. However, the greatest threat wasn't the raised road, but the ringing of the bells. It was created by the collision of two cult legacy treasures hitting each other. The aristocratic family of West Earth is so fierce. Fatty dragon, don't move. Qin Mu couldn't resist praising the enemy as his vital Kai burst forth. Countless runes flew around his body, then swept forward to surround the dragon kiln. The devastating sound wave charged over, but before its destructive energy could reach the dragon kiln, the rune markings formed a teleportation formation. With the teleportation divine art activated, Qin Mu disappeared along with the dragon kiln. The next moment, they appeared a mile away. If it was just Qin Mu himself, he could teleport 20 to 30 miles away. If he brought a person along, he could still teleport 10 miles. However, when bringing along a behemoth like the dragon kiln, a mile was already his limit. But the distance of a mile was simply too short for the mountain giant. With just one stride, it could probably travel over 10 miles. Qin Mu turned back to look, and saw that the place where they had been at had flown up, trembling violently like streamers in the wind. Next, the road shattered into pieces from the violent sound wave. It actually destroyed over 20 miles of road, leaving nothing in its path. The mountain giant doesn't have magic power, but just by smacking the two huge bells together, he unleashed such a terrifying power. It's truly amazing. Qin Mu couldn't resist praising the enemy. The dragon kiln immediately began to while behind them. The incomparably humongous mountain giant turned to take its first step. Qin Mu suddenly saw darkness over his head, and when he looked up, the huge foot of the mountain giant was already above them. The dragon kiln's speed instantly increased drastically, surpassing the speed of sound with a few ups and downs. The Fatty's improvement shocked Qin Mu. He didn't know what kind of spirit pills Fatty Dragon had eaten for his speed to surpass what it was in the past by so much. At such a dangerous situation, the dragon kiln couldn't be bothered about tricking his meal owner to improve his meals. He only cared about escaping with his life, and the speed he unleashed was simply astounding. Boom! Behind them, the huge foot of the mountain giant landed on the ground, creating a lake underneath itself. The next moment, he raised his hand to smash down a huge brass bell. The dragon killer sprinted frantically, and the huge bell landed behind him. However, the power of that huge bell was extremely terrifying. When the sound wave entered the ground, its speed was 3 to 5 times faster than in the air. Behind the dragon killer, the ground exploded, and it was a horrendous sight. The sound wave even reached the dragon killer and blew him up in the air. Fire clouds immediately grew under the dragon killer's feet, and he began sprinting again. Behind him, the mountain giant swung the other huge brass bell while the other one was raised upward so they would hit each other again. Bang! The bells rang out, and where the two collided, ripples from the sound wave compressed equal space into physical substance. When the sound wave moved along it, its speed got even faster. Qin Mu's hair stood up on ends as he hurriedly flicked backward and took out Moon Jedi. It lit up, and a beam of light went straight at the sound wave. Wing! The destructive sound wave was split into 2 halves by the beam, and 2 waves of terrifying energy brushed past the dragon killer. The tremors made Qin Mu's scalp crawl, and he shivered not from the cold. If they had been struck by that sound wave, he couldn't care, and even the dragon killer would have been shaken into countless shattered pieces and ceased to exist. West Earth still has its own knowledge, but this kind of knowledge is not good for cultivation. Qin Mu looked back and saw that mountain giant had been sliced by the beam of Moon Jedi. Half of its left shoulder had collapsed, and the dragon killer moved farther and farther away. With the abilities of the mountain giant, it could no longer hit them with the sound waves. At that moment, the mountain giant suddenly squatted down. When Qin Mu saw that, his heart trembled violently. The mountain giant suddenly started to sprint, and its speed was simply unbelievable. My God, that's not right. There must be someone controlling this mountain giant. Otherwise, it couldn't so set on me and the dragon killer, chasing us like mad. Qin Mu came to realization. The woman of Yu family that had removed the seal had already been killed, so it couldn't be her. It meant that another person had to have hidden close by, and their cultivation had to be extremely high as well. Otherwise, how could they control such a huge mountain giant? Just as he thought that, a sword light suddenly flew through the sky, and a human head fell from midair, followed by a few sections of a corpse. It was a silver-haired old woman who had been holding a cane in her hands. That cane had also been severed into 2. Qin Mu was slightly stunned. He looked at the mountain giant again and saw that it suddenly froze in place, giving up on his chase. It thus should have been the white-haired old lady who had controlled the mountain giant in the dark to attack them. Otherwise, how would the mountain giant have immediately attacked Qin Mu the moment it awakened? Fatty dragon, stop. The dragon killer immediately stopped, even if he didn't understand why. Qin Mu opened Cinnabar Heaven's eyes to look at the mountain giant, and saw a figure standing on its head. It was Ji-Ki. The sword light flew back from the clouds, and swirled 2 rounds around him. Ji-Ki bowed and bade them farewell. Have a safe journey. Qin Mu also bowed as a parting. Thanks for your auspicious words. The figure then raised a flag to cover himself and vanished from the top of the mountain. Teleportation flag. Patriarch also gave him one. Qin Mu smiled. He's like Patriarch. They both look indifferent to worldly rewards, but actually, they're both very warm-hearted. Ji-Ki is no doubt Patriarch's son. Fatty Dragon, Patriarch has a successor. Tales of Herding Gods Chapter 450 Flying City on Land. The dragon killer stepped on fire clouds while heading southwest. Heavenly Province Sect was right in front of them, and its 2 mountains were like a heavenly gate. There were all kinds of palaces on them. Yu Kenshin was heading to Heavenly Province Sect when he suddenly sensed something and turned back to see the dragon killer carrying Qin Mu on his back. Yu Kenshin jumped in shock and immediately stopped. His speed is so fast. If I go back to the sect and snitch on him, he might just kill me right there. The dragon killer stopped and Qin Mu greeted him. Yu Kenshin returned the greeting. Why isn't Brother Yu attending Flowery Mountain Festival and is returning back to Heavenly Province Sect? Qin Mu asked with a friendly expression. Yu Kenshin immediately smiled at him. I'm ugly, and it's hard for me to please a beauty, so there's no point in participating in Flowery Mountain Festival. Qin Mu's smile grew warm. How is Brother Yu ugly? You have the look of a talent, and would definitely win a beauty's heart. It's best if you go back to attend Flowery Mountain Festival. Yu Kenshin's hair stood up on ends. The last time Qin Mu had said a similar phrase was when he had executed Sword of Founding Emperor Sea of Blood and killed 4 experts on the spot. Now he repeated it. If Yu Kenshin wasn't tactful and insisted on returning to the mountain. What awaited him was probably a sword to end his life. Much thanks to Cult Master Qin's auspicious words. Xianxia gave his thanks and turned to return to Fragrant Bloom City. Qin Mu saw him off before letting the dragon killer hurry up on their way, taking a detour around Heavenly Province sect. Xianxia saw Fragrant Bloom City from far away and turned back to take a look, thinking to himself, True Heaven Palace ordered his arrest, so if my sect could take him down and make our relationship with True Heaven Palace closer, my position in the sect would definitely rise greatly. He planned to return when he saw a huge giant-shaped mountain in the barren plains. It left him stunned. He then saw the shattered roads and the destruction caused by the sound waves. Numerous experts of Yu family were flying over the limbs of Yu family's old grandmother while bawling loudly. Yu family's old grandmother is also dead. Xianxia was stunned for a time, then went straight to Fragrant Bloom City. Even the old grandmother of Yu family couldn't stop him with a huge mountain, so it would definitely be difficult for our Heavenly Province sect to catch him. It is better to avoid unnecessary trouble, so why don't I just meet with the beauties? Bamboo City is right ahead. 2 days later, Qin Mu stood on the head of the dragon kiln with the geographical map of West Earth in his hands. He carefully checked and matched the astronomical phenomenon and said happily after reaching Bamboo City, "We won't be far from True Heaven Palace." Fatty Dragon, you've been hard working lately, running very quickly this time. The last 2 days, the dragon kiln didn't become lazy and worked very hard. With his leg power, travelling 20,000 miles a day, they would take half a day at most to reach True Heaven Palace. Along the way, they had met quite a lot of trouble. With the order of arrest from True Heaven Palace, there were numerous divine arts practitioners searching for his traces, and there had been quite a few fierce battles. However, a battle as fierce as Yu family's bell-swaying mountain giant did not repeat. The battle power of the bell-swaying mountain giant was simply too terrifying, and those who could possess such treasures were usually influential families. The preparation time for this kind of weapon was too long, so they had to have an awakened mountain giant in advance or something under a seal. The dragon kiln's speed was very fast, so unless someone knew where he was going, it was impossible for them to prepare in advance to intercept him. On the journey, Qin Mu had experienced the strangeness of West Earth's paths, skills, and divine arts. Other than using mountains and rivers as weapons, the divine arts practitioners of West Earth would also raise some monsters. They would enlighten some strange beasts and awaken the spirits. By raising them since they were young, they would make them extremely loyal. On top of that, strange beasts were also their spirit weapons. They would be used as such, and when compared to mountain spirits and earth spirits, they were much more nimble and versatile. West Earth's paths, skills, and divine arts of all things having spirits was truly an eye-opener. The dragon kiln sprinted, and they got closer and closer to Bamboo City. It was mostly a mountainous land before it, and they would meet divine arts practitioners rushing through the sky from time to time. Most of them were riding flying strange beasts. Qin Mu raised his eyebrows at many divine arts practitioners of West Earth monitoring his movements. "We are being monitored again. Looks like we can't enter Bamboo City. There will definitely be traps laid there. We can only go through the wilderness." Qin Mu's consciousness pulsed as he used the communication method of heavenly feathers to alert the dragon kiln. He then took in a long breath which filled his whole chest. Whoosh! He spewed out all that air, and instantly, fog spread in all directions, covering over 10 miles of the sky. The dragon kiln immediately sank into the woods. The divine arts practitioners rushed into the fog to search, but when the fog dispersed, Qin Mu and the rest were long gone. "Young master is here," a divine arts practitioner suddenly announced nervously. A precious carriage flew over, with phoenixes pulling it along. In the carriage was a youth who looked stout, but not fat. Beside him were numerous women accompanying him. What was strange was that in West Earth women were clearly in a higher social position, but in front of that youth, the women of True Heaven Palace could only act servile and not be reckless. Numerous divine arts practitioners greeted the newcomer. Young Master Yu surveyed the surroundings and smiled. He still managed to escape. It's no wonder. Back when I led everyone to chase after Nikiui, he also interfered and let Nikiui escape. That was in Great Ruins, and not West Earth, so I couldn't be reckless. Now that we're in my land, it's slightly childish if he still thinks he can escape from my grasp. The youth was none other than Yu Bochuan, who had chased after Qinziyu and her daughter. He was the son of the palace master of True Heaven Palace, and even though he was young, his methods were ruthless, and he was deceitful in many ways. Xianxia had been the palace master of True Heaven Palace until she was overthrown by Yu family. Yu Botchun's cultivation wasn't considered great, but he could lead a crowd to chase after her, who was a cult master level existence, and nearly sent her to death after killing the strong practitioners beside her one by one. It showed Yu Botchun's abilities. His schemes were deep and extraordinary. Yu Botchun gently nodded, and a female of True Heaven Palace flew up to execute her divine art. Suddenly, the white clouds in the sky wiggled and transformed into an arrow shape that pointed downward. The carriage drove into the forest below, and another woman stomped her foot. Numerous rocks started to roll together and formed a rock giant, which pointed in the direction Qin Mu had left while saying, "The person riding a huge beast went that way." The woman then dispersed her divine art, and the stone giant crumbled back into a pile of rocks. Phoenixes pulled the carriage forward while Yu Botchun sat in it with a smile. In West Earth, no one can escape the tracking of our True Heaven Palace. The previous Naiqi couldn't, and it's even more impossible for this cult master Qin. The master, this time it was the Grand Master of the Golden Palace, who came to inform us, asking Elder Bai of our True Heaven Palace to arrest this cult master Qin. A woman of True Heaven Palace smiled in a charming way. Elder Bai and the Grand Master of the Golden Palace have old ties, so ordering their arrest was expected. That Grand Master borrowed the power of our True Heaven Palace to get rid of a strong enemy, so he will owe a favor to our True Heaven Palace. But why is young Master helping him personally? Yu Botchun smiled. I'm not helping Grand Master. Instead, I'm meeting Cult Master Qin. I had suffered a loss under his hand the previous time and let him snatch Green Dragon Bead away, which is a precious treasure. Since he dared to barge into our West Earth again, I naturally have to teach him a lesson. Besides, coming to West Earth this time, he must have ill intentions. I suspect his motive isn't just simply touring around. Since he saved the previous Naiqi and the little princess, I'm afraid he is going to try to help her snatch back the seat of the princess. With him around, Naiqi is definitely not too far away. His gaze became cold, and he said indifferently, "Even though my mother has become the master of True Heaven Palace, as long as she doesn't give birth to a little princess, her seat of palace master won't be firm." Naiqi's motive for coming back is nothing unexpected. However, this cult master Qin and the previous Naiqi will never expect how great my strength can be. He raised his head to look in the direction in which Qin Mu had left and said coldly, "Let me give them a big surprise." The dragon killer sprinted among the mountains as though he was flying and past numerous mountainous ridges. His speed was inferior to before, but it was still considered fast. Qin Mu surveyed the surroundings and frowned slightly. The terrain here was slightly different from the topology on West Earth's geographic map that Ji-Ki had given him. The divine arts practitioners of West Earth like to fight around with mountains, and I reckon they don't place them back after fighting. Using the terrain to determine my location is not a certain thing. I still require the astronomical observations. He raised his head and formation marking swirled in his eyes. He raised his head up to look at the sky, and the stars and constellations that were blocked by the sunlight gradually appeared. He determined his location and let out a sigh of relief before smiling. "We have already passed Bamboo City." When he said that, rumbling suddenly came from the front, and Qin Mu frowned slightly. He raised his head to look ahead and saw dust permeating the sky, transforming into fog to shroud the mountain ranges. He couldn't see what had caused the world-shaking movements in front. The dragon killer also immediately stopped in his footsteps and looked nervously ahead. The dust became denser and denser as it rolled forward, swallowing forests and mountains. "Cult Master, what's that?" The dragon killer gave an astonished cry. The ground was trembling continuously, and the trees around them were also shaking. The rocks were jumping up and down on the ground like there was an earthquake. However, it wasn't what was happening. Qin Mu opened Cinnabar Heaven's eyes and looked at the dust surging forward, and his eyes went wide in disbelief. "There is a city in the Duster City," the dragon killer asked in bewilderment. "How can a city create such a big commotion?" "Because this city is currently running through the forest." Qin Mu's scalp almost exploded from his surprise, and he said sternly, "That city is running toward us. Fatty dragon, let's go." The dust surged forth, and a magnificent city entered their eyes. It was running straight at them. Below the city walls that were over numerous yards tall were incomparably thick legs. Behind the wall, huge houses had already become giants overflowing with murderous intent. Some were beating drums while others were carrying huge treasures. The gates of the city in the meantime opened and razor-sharp teeth grew out from them as well as the city walls. They opened and closed continuously, and everything that passed through them was chewed into bits and pieces, including mountain peaks, All that couldn't be chewed into bits and pieces entered the city and were smashed into smithereens by the monster-like giants in the city. The city kept on sprinting toward them, and on its gates there were 2 words: Bamboo City. The divine arts practitioners of West Earth had actually awakened an entire city.